And we're live. Hello,
Hi, slums.
Hopefully, your people can hear you in that microphone.
Okay,
I think so. I turned it up enough.
okay.
All right, so let's get to the beginning. What is your name?
My birth name is Rebecca Louise Mitchell.
All right. Okay, and when were you born?
I was born June 26, 1953, in Pontiac, Michigan.
Pontiac, Michigan. Okay, we're a long way from there. Um, who are your parents? Who were you born to?
My mom, his name was Helen Marie Hatchett Mitchell, and my dad was Robert Leroy Mitchell.
Okay, I didn't know your mom had a hyphenated last name.
She did.
I thought you said Hatchet Mitchell.
Oh, I mean, she was Hatchett.
Oh,
Was
then
her
became.
maiden name.
Okay, okay.
Mitchell was her married name.
All right, so let's start from the beginning. What's your first memory?
Oh, being a child living in Pontiac, going over to my grandmother's house. So I was real little, but I always remember, and I think probably something that now that I think about it, has impacted me all my life. And I always remember somebody turning on the lights in the kitchen and roaches being all over the place. I don't know if that was at my grandma's house,
Mm-hmm.
but that was my earliest memory. And to this day, I just cannot deal with roaches.
Yes, that's something we all know for you.
And maybe that is that because of that childhood memory.
How many siblings did you have, or do you
I
have had?
I have three sisters,
Mm-hmm.
and I had three step half brothers. I have wait a minute. I have two sisters and a half sister, and three half brothers. So my mom had my oldest sister,
Mm-hmm.
um, Eileen Hatchett, or who is Akua Duku Anoche, Dr. Akua Duku Anoche. She's my oldest sister, and she's my half sister. She has a different father. My dad had three sons who, Robert, Robbie, and I think Junior, which was Junior because he was Robert too. But my dad had a number of other kids outside of um, these. They were much older than us. Well, my dad was about 10 years older than my mom, so he had children. And then my two sisters, Rhonda and Rosanna, was now Fatima. Um, so it was growing up. It was just us four girls.
It was just the four of
Yeah,
you.
and even with Akua lived with her step grandmother um, for years, like when she was a child, and then um, I mean, she was literally raised by Mama Essie Harris, who was her her dad's stepmother, and so she was raised by her dad's stepmother. And
To what age was she raised by?
oh wow, until she went to college, till she went to school,
Okay.
to college, and and even for a period of time when my mom, when we were living in Pontiac, my mom got a job in Detroit, which was only about maybe a half an hour away. It may have been longer back during that time because traffic was different. But so my mom and my dad sort of separated. My mom went off to work in Detroit. She moved to Detroit. We were staying with my dad in Pontiac. And a lot of this story that I'm telling you is don't, I can't necessarily verify it
Mm-hmm.
because I don't know all of this, but this is what I was told, that my dad was brought to court and he was going to be charged with, I don't know if it was money laundering or what, but he was doing something illegal. And so they were going to put me and Fatima, my sister Fatima, and Aunt Rhonda in foster care. And Mama Essie, my sister's step grandma,
Mm-hmm.
she took us in. So, but she was, I always say this, the woman was abusive. I don't care what anybody says. They tell you don't to speak ill of the dead, but she was truly abusive
You
to
and
me and my
sister.
sisters.
Okay.
And and I always remember when my mom would come, I would be the main one crying, telling her I want to leave, I want to go with her.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because this woman was, I'm serious, she was abusive. I mean, if you look back on some of the things she did, and she was just just I mean, I understand we were put on her, so to speak, but it's that classic case of not wanting somebody's kids there and then
She had her own
abusing them.
kids.
No, only Anakua.
Okay.
But Anakua was treated a whole lot different than we were when we were all growing up because she was, light skinned, and it was still all that old issue with colorism and stuff. Plus she had been living with her all those years. And so, we were never looked at as being on the same, I guess, level, or I don't know what. But anyway, I think we stayed with her. There were so many things that happened. We stayed with her, I would say, almost a year. It may have been less, but it felt like a
It
year.
felt like
And then my mom came. I remember my mom came, and it was like, "You're going to take me. I don't care what happens. I'm not staying here anymore."
what ages were you?
Mm,
Were y'all around
We
that time?
were in
Were you in?
elementary school.
Okay, so this was school age.
Yeah, this
Okay.
is school age. I was going to school. I was put into this accelerated class as I was moved from the school that me and my sisters all were going to, and I was sent to this other school that was supposed to be, for students who were doing well in school. Anyway, and so when I went to that school, I had to walk to school by myself, and it wasn't a short distance.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so I always remember, um, yeah, my mom came and it was like, I'm not staying here any longer. I don't care. And so she took me. I think she took Aunt Rhonda, me and Aunt Rhonda and Aunt Fatima back to Detroit with her.
Okay.
Akua, of course, she stayed because she was living there.
Okay.
So we went to live with my mama. We were in, oh God, it had to be the third, fourth, fifth grade.
But y'all were in different schools.
No, this was in Detroit.
So by the time you got to Detroit, now y'all all going to the same
Same
school.
school. Yeah.
Okay, how was that?
That was fine. I mean,
You had your sisters with you.
yeah, we were staying in this, and I think it had to have been in the summer because I don't remember going to school from this place where my mom had been staying. It was sort of like a motel hotel type thing, and then we moved from there into this, and this I can tell you the year too because it was the year that Kennedy uh, died, was
Okay.
killed, was assassinated, which is it, 63?
Okay.
So I had to be like 10, because I was born in 53. Um, and
So
so
now you're in Detroit.
we're in Detroit,
What year was the riots?
68, because
Okay, so that's further
King,
along.
that's when King was killed.
Yes. Okay, so this
Yeah,
is 63.
yeah, 63. So we moved into this really nice um, apartment. It was like a fourplex,
Okay.
and we were staying there. Was that where we was? I mean, I keep, you have these memories of other places you stayed that I do remember, but that was later. Yeah, that had to be later. So we were staying at this, it was a real nice place and everything. Mom had gotten, I remember that we always remember this because for on Fatima's birthday, she got us this record player, TV, one of those big, combos.
Uh-huh.
And I remember we always talked about how that all we got to see was Kennedy's funeral because that's what was going on. So yeah, I always remember that. And so we were staying over in that
So what changed for her to where she was able to provide these things?
my mom had gotten a job at UAW. She was working for the auto industry. She was not working in the auto. She was working for the union. So the United Auto Workers, she had gotten a job there as a secretary. Um, and she had this relationship with Marshall. What was Marshall's last name? Marshall. But he was, and I'll have to look that up. But Marshall, this white guy, he was married,
Mm-hmm.
but mom had a long time relationship with him. And
Friendship.
no, it was a sexual relationship. It was all of that.
Okay.
But yeah, so he helped us get a house
Mm-hmm.
where we moved into this all white neighborhood. And I was in the fifth grade. I remember that. I was in the fifth grade. That was after
So this is
after Kennedy was killed.
so now you're going to a third elementary now?
I've gone. I had counted it up. I think I had gone to about 9 different schools before I had gotten into. By the time I got into fifth grade, 9.
9 different schools.
9 different schools. Yeah, I had gone to a lot.
So how did that feel? Having to restart, learn new kids, being the new kid?
Yeah, and I don't know how it felt really. I don't know if that ever impacted me because I was always very studious. So school. I wasn't. That was my whole thing. I wanted to be in school, so it never. I don't think it ever had an impact on me. I don't know. I don't know why, but and it may have been 9 schools all in all total.
Okay.
Because I went to Ruth Ruff, which was when we moved into the house,
Okay.
and then Mackenzie. Yeah, so it may have been 9 altogether because I went to. Yeah, I think it was there. I think it was 9 altogether because my elementary and high school and junior high school was same school. Because me and Aunt Rhonda were the only ones there. Now Fatima went to I think she went to high school, Mackenzie High School.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know. That's a fascinating question whether not going to all those schools had an impact on me. I do remember I was very shy, but I was always the teacher's pet.
Hmm.
So because I always liked school and
Hmm.
I was always doing well in school. Um, and I remember, I always remember this. And I don't know, for years, it was just so embarrassing to me. There were three guys at this elementary school I used to go to. And, for Valentine's Day, they would have you make Valentine's Day cards.
Hmm.
And I remember these three guys giving me Valentine's Day cards. And I was so embarrassed. I was like, I really was. I didn't tell anybody about that for years because it was like, why? But yeah, so yeah, that was so strange. It was. I really, really didn't, I wasn't involved. I had friends, but I didn't have a lot of friends. One of my friends, Cynthia, what was Cynthia Beaver? I always remember
And this is
Cynthia.
fifth grade.
It was in fifth. Well, no, because Cynthia became my friend before. Was it before? No, it was in junior high.
So
Junior high.
yeah, I'm wondering,
Hmm.
like, if you made friends at these schools and then you had to move to another school.
The only, like I said, I'm mixing things up. I know because I can't remember, but I remember. I remember the twins. There were twins, a set of twins who were white, and there were a set of twins who were black, who were friends of mine. The set of twins who were white were strange because, okay, so you got to remember, I did not go to, so I did when I was in Pontiac, I had friends.
Hmm.
One of my friends, who became a longtime friend, turned up, you think about it now, was transgender. He was one of my best friends. Um, and I had friends, when I was um, in Pontiac because my cousins, were there. We all were together. We would go to school together and stuff. My cousin Bubby and I went to the same school, and he always had a learning disability. He's developmentally handicapped, and so I had to look out for him too. So yeah, so I had friends when I was, in Pontiac, and then
Yeah.
when we moved. I
But when you
mean,
moved to Detroit, those friends were basically lost, right?
no, they weren't lost because we would always go to Pontiac.
Okay.
That's what I said. My friend in Pontiac, he was one of my longtime friends. Some of our friends lived next door to my Aunt Shirley,
Yeah.
so we knew them for long periods of time. What was his name? I cannot think of his name. That's how I'm getting old. But he was, really a long time friend. And then I had a lot of cousins. So, we were always together. We always were doing anything. One of my cousin Florence, who was killed tragically at home. Um, Florence was a mess. She was just such a mess, though. Um, so, we had friends and family because it was a small town. Most of those people you knew.
You said when you moved to Detroit, it was in a white neighborhood, though.
Not initially. When we first moved, after we came back with my mother, she was living in this hotel motel thing, and I always remember that was the time I stopped eating tomatoes because I got so sick I threw up. And anytime I threw up, it meant, never again. But yeah, that's what I remember about that place. And then we moved to that duplex or fourplex, really. And That was a black neighborhood,
Okay.
which is why I think, yes, come to think about it, Sully, that's what happened. And so all of this is coming back. So we moved into this black neighborhood. Kennedy was killed. So that's all we saw on TV. But right after that happened, somebody broke into the house and stole the TV and stuff.
Wow.
We got it back because
Mhm.
I remember the police being there and everything. And that's when Mom said, and she was dealing with Marshall at that time, and she got a house. That's when we moved into that all white neighborhood when I was in the 5th grade. And yeah, that was.
So Marshall, did he used to come over?
Mm,
So you met Marshall?
oh yeah. My mother. What was fascinating is because so Marshall was a married man. And
How did you know he was married?
everybody knew he was, because my mother's friends and all. She had another good friend was a white woman.
Mhm.
Who was also dealing with a married man. So he was black. Yeah, my mom always had a mixture of friends. We always had black and white friends. So yeah, Marshall, uh, it was interesting because it was not just, I mean, you have to have Renee tell you the story. So my mom was dealing with Marshall, but she also had other guys that she was seeing. One of the guys she was seeing was the brother of one of the main singers in the Four Tops. And I always remember we used to go to his sister's beauty parlor, and everybody wanted her to do our hair because she knew how to do your hair, and you'd never have to cry or anything. My mother was always pulling on my head and stuff. Anyway, I mean, these are the kinds of things I just start to remember. But this guy, and maybe I shouldn't say, don't. Maybe you need.
Yeah, you're fine.
I don't need to say this. This guy who was, well, my mother's dead anyway, who was considered my mother's boyfriend, who was brother of the Four Tops guy, was also trying to sleep with my sister Randy. And so Randy would just string him along. She had him buying her all kinds of stuff. It was terrible. She had him buying her clothes and shoes and food, and she was stringing him along. And nobody told my mother anything. It was like, Rhonda was like, yeah. I'm gonna. She said, "Oh, I'll meet you this." And this guy was just buying her stuff and all. So that was great. Fatima was dealing with this drug dealer who was one of the. And this is all we live in this predominantly white neighborhood and all.
But this is what, high school though, right? Later on.
Yeah, I'm Fatima was in high school, but Aunt Rhonda was. I guess it was high school. This was later on, and because that when we moved into that house was it on Ward Street? That was our last house we had. As when I was. I mean, it was.
How long did y'all live there?
From the time I was in the 5th grade till I went to college.
Okay, so she.
And Aunt Rhonda, she sold the house to Aunt Rhonda. Aunt Rhonda's story. If you only knew some of the things that Rennie did. Because Rennie was always having some scam that she was doing on one of my mother's boyfriends or something. Lord, and so and I'm the main. So you ask them, and they're the ones that I'm sort of like the mother figure, telling people, you need to do this. We have to keep the house clean. We have to, do good, so mom won't have to worry about that. That was my whole thing. Do right so your mother doesn't have. She's the only one paying for everything. So
So they got into boys kind of early.
Oh yeah, they were. They were, they were doing all kinds of things. But I was always the academic. I was always the one, the mother figure, always trying to tell them that they need to be what they need to be doing.
And all of them will vouch for this, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you asked them. Yeah, they always will say that. What did they call me? Because Rhonda said I had they would always say I had a sharp tongue. And if guys ever tried to say something to me, I was always, telling them off. So something like that. I wasn't interested. I was more interested in, like I said, so they were always causing chaos. Um, and I'm always the one trying to say, look, mom is out here working by herself. Why are you trying to make it hard? Fatima liked to cook and clean, but Fatima, like my mom would always say, she would tear the house up in order to clean it. And it would just be in chaos for days while she's trying to clean. And my mom would always tell her, clean up as you go along, not have the house all in the wreck. And I was the one who was more interested, making sure we had that there were no boys in the house or that they were doing anything, making sure the house was clean, making sure we ate. So I did a lot of the cooking and stuff. Not any. I wasn't a good cook. Nobody was going to get sick, but I never liked cooking. So yeah, we were. It was different because we were there. In this house.
You were in high school by the time King got killed, right?
68? Yeah. 68. Yeah, I was in high school because I graduated in 71.
Well, during this time, the only reason I brought up the white neighborhood was to see if y'all faced any type of racism.
Oh, sure.
During that time.
Absolutely. Every day from day one. I always tell people the very day we moved in, the police came knocking at our door because our neighbor across the street didn't want to tell us to move the car. She called the police. And the police were like, "Oh, you moved into this all white neighborhood." They and they were not taking our side. Yes. They were like, "Oh, you got to be, mindful of the neighbors." And the neighbors on our so the neighbors on the house. So say that you're facing the house. The house is right there. The neighbor on that side was this elderly white woman who was really nice. We didn't have problems with her. The neighbors on the other side was this family of white trash. But later on, the kid, one of the kids became a good friend of ours. But people weren't speaking to us anything, and then the neighbors all on down that way of the street were just horrible. They, I remember my mom getting into it because my mom didn't curse. Mm-hmm. She didn't believe in spanking. The only child that I know that Fatima got a spanking one time, and I think it killed my mom more than it hurt her.
When did she get a spanking?
Because she stole something.
Oh.
Fatima, yeah, or she may have lied about something. So I think it was something that she lied about, and mom, and that
Did y'all see the spanking?
No.
Okay.
It was maybe a couple of hits on the hand or something. It wasn't any beating, My dad believed in that. My mom. Mm-mm. And I don't ever remember. I'm trying to think of. I may have gotten a swat from my dad, but I don't ever remember getting a spanking.
Well, how long did you live with your dad? Or did you ever?
We lived with my dad for you know, our early years, but my dad was just an abusive man, which I didn't find out until later too. But it didn't surprise me. He was abusive to my mother. He was just an abuse. He was abusive to his other kids. He was never abusive, and Fatima was his favorite. He just adored anything she did.
What did he do for a living?
My dad was he was an electrician. He was what is the thing that they do at he because he worked at he made a good living because he worked at Chrysler. He was and he had a skill that I can't remember what it was. But the other thing my dad did, which is why I think he went to jail, he was sort of like the loan shark. So Sully, it was so funny. I tell people this all the time. We had not so much a loan shark. What is it when you know when people need to sell something quickly and you give them money? I don't know where he got this money from. Okay. You know they have these places. What do they call?
You're talking about the
where you can
cash.
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about.
So we had TVs in every house every room in our house when we were little kids. My dad was sort of like the loan shark in the neighborhood.
So they would give him something. He would give them
and he would give them cash.
And if they don't pay him back by a certain time, he keep the product.
So we had tons of stuff. And I always remember my dad made the first color TV I ever saw. He made it himself. So he was, you know, he had those kinds of skills, but I think that's why he went to jail, because he was like the local loan shark.
How long did he go to jail for?
I don't even know, but that's what I'm saying. My sisters have told me all of this. I didn't even know about I knew later on, you recognize the abuse. He was very abusive to his sons, much more than his daughters.
Did y'all have a relationship with the sons?
Just my brother, Junior.
Why only him?
Because the other two boys went with their mothers, and we never saw them. We knew who they were, but and only once in a while did we see. Because Robbie moved across the street from my dad years later when we were all adults. But no, my Junior, because Junior was almost my mom's age, and he had kids, and his wife was the most abusive person my dad had some really abusive. His aunts, this is why I think my dad was so abusive. He was an orphan sent to live with his cousins who didn't want him there, and they were just abusive. They weren't even abusive to because one of my cousin Harriet had a son. Mm-hmm. She was just vicious and mean. He committed suicide, and they took my dad in as this orphan, but they were just, really abusive, Sully. I just beat and doing stuff. Kids, they were just, I was terrified of them. That's how bad they were, because they were just so horrible. And so my dad, I think he never learned what it was to have that kind of affection as he was growing up. Because his dad died, right, I think before he was born. His mother died when he was like 11. So, he never had a really nurturing environment. So my dad was just, abusive to, he would charge his own kids, not us. The girls he left alone for the most part. Like I said, Fatima was his favorite. He'd do anything for her, even when she got older. Mm-hmm. But his
would he
sons,
outright just say, "That's my favorite," or
everybody knew. No, everybody knew it. anything Fatima wanted, Roseanne was, that was his heart. And he would say it, that Roseanne is my heart. Um, yeah, I mean, but my dad was just that kind of a person, he's a whole uh, psychological story. I think that just talking about, you look back on it, and it's not because as you're growing up, my dad was not there for us.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't support us. He I don't think he ever gave my mother any money for alimony or anything. And for our birthdays, he would always send us. Uh, it was $50 plus our age, and that was all the money you ever got. So if you were 16, you got $66. And that's that. I mean, but we were
At
going
that time. That was some good money.
Yeah, well, it wasn't a lot. I mean, the thing is, my dad was just cheap. He spent money on himself. Yeah.
Think about it, $50 back, because $50 when I was growing up would have been a lot of money.
Yeah. I mean, it probably was, but that was all he ever gave you.
Okay.
Once a year you got a birthday card with a check. And during the riots, we got stuck over here to his house. Did I tell you that? We got stuck over there because Mom had gone out of town and we were staying with him. And the riots happened. And where he lived on the east side of Detroit is where the riots took place. So we couldn't even go home. They were shooting over the people were on the roof shooting and stuff.
Did any of y'all partake?
No.
So
your Abu did. But
he said his brother did.
But no, we were hiding on the floor. We were on the floor. Oh no, we weren't about to go out there because even though Fatima was dealing with a drug dealer and he was the top drug dealer in the city, she didn't do drugs. She didn't hang out and do, she would go to parties and stuff, and sometimes she would bring us to party. That was the first time I was around somebody smoking weed, which is why I never liked, and I always tell people I never liked drugs, never liked weed, never. First of all, my mom's brothers were both heroin addicts. Mm-hmm. She had two brothers who were heroin addicts, and she had three brothers, but two of them. One, my Uncle John was more of an academic. He was a professor, but her two youngest brothers were heroin addicts. My mother was the oldest of 5 kids, and she didn't trust them to do anything. She refused to let them come to her house. My Aunt Shirley would let them come over there, and they'd rip her off and steal from her. I remember one Christmas, we were all there for my Aunt Shirley's house, and my Uncle Howard had bought her a carving knife, an electric carving knife. And after she had carved the turkey and the ham, I remember later that evening we kept saying, "Where's the carving knife?" He had taken it back and stolen it. But and my mom refused to let him in her house. So she told them they cannot come in. She was not dealing with that. So I was never a person who liked to do drugs. Didn't want to be around them. So I was with Fatima one night. Some people were smoking weed, and I could not. I mean, I blacked out. And every time I've been around somebody who's smoking weed, I black out. So I don't like being around drugs. Never took drugs. Didn't like to drink either. I did drink a little bit, but never liked to drink. So I was never a person. I did smoke. I smoked for years.
Cigarettes?
Cigarettes, yeah.
How did you start smoking cigarettes?
I started smoking cigarettes when I was 14.
14?
14 or 15.
Was it the commercials that they used to run? Okay.
No. For me, it's always been the influence the environment I'm in. So all my friends are smoking, and my mother never said don't smoke.
Mhm.
You know, if she had probably said that to me, I probably would. Like my mother was a heavy drinker. I used to think she drank too much. I thought my mother was an alcoholic for years because she was always drinking. And so I never liked that. I didn't like, but I did smoke. I smoked for years. I stopped smoking. Uh, I think when I got pregnant with Vicky, I stopped smoking. I didn't start up again until it was a couple of years later, a few years later, and that was only because I was working at a bank and everybody there was smoking. But as soon as I quit that job, the day after I stopped smoking and I haven't smoked since, and that was since 1979, 1978. How old is when is Ayub's birthday? No,
Ayub
I
was in
was
74,
4.
maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was 74, not 78. 74, I stopped smoking. And I haven't smoked since.
So Vietnam went on around that time too. Was going
Yeah,
on.
yeah.
Did that affect y'all? Because y'all
All my friends, we had lots of friends
they got drafted.
who went. Yeah. And a number
Male
of them-
friends or
male friends.
okay? 'Cause
Yeah.
were they drafting female?
No,
Just male.
just male. Yeah, a number of our male friends went. Carlton, Vincent, not Vincent, was it? Oh, one of our friends who went came back and he was shell shocked. So you'd just be walking down the street and you'd see him in the middle of the street, trying to stop traffic, screaming. So that happened to maybe three of our friends, three of our good friends. One of them committed suicide. Carlton, and I remember Carlton because Carlton went, but Carlton, it didn't seem to affect him. But there was one of our friends who, years later, I found out he committed suicide. Um, but other friends who did go, they came back messed up. Yeah, it had and I don't know if I could say I was anti-war or even if I knew what was happening to our friends. So and a lot of our friends were not just my friends; they were so all of us, me and Aunt Rhonda and Aunt and Fatima, all of our friends we were all together.
Yeah.
So I can't say this was my friend and wasn't their friend too, because we were all friends. When we moved into that white neighborhood, after we had been there maybe for a year, a family of about 6 or 7 people, friends that became longtime friends of ours, moved down the street, and so they were the first Black on their street, and we all became really good friends. I mean, even to this day, I think Fatima, not Fatima, Rennie still do, but Rennie still has. See, Rennie's maintained contact with a lot of those people that we didn't, that me and Rose didn't, because Rennie still hung out a lot with them. Rennie was out of all of us. I'd say Randy and even Aunt Fatima, they were not into school. They weren't interested. I mean, they both graduated from high school and all, but they weren't interested in doing anything more with school after that. Yeah, so the I don't think the only person I would say like Anakua, she was dealing with drugs and stuff. I mean, not heavily,
Mhm.
but she was doing. I don't know if she did with LSD or thing. See, I guess in many ways, Sully, we were very much very conservative in so many ways. Because even Fatima, like I said, even Fatima and Rhonda, none of us were dealing with drugs. If people were dealing with drugs, like we would get parties, and our parties were really, really well attended. But we would tell people no drugs, no drugs at all. Um, and so when we had parties back then, they were dance parties. They were things for people to come and have a good time. But yeah, it was a strange time. I can't say we were really even knew much
What
about
about
the war.
were y'all? Were y'all? Did y'all grow up religious or did y'all
No,
go to church?
no, but you are social religious, so it became a place of meeting friends. So I do remember it was the pride of for me and Aunt Rhonda. We always had to get our outfits for Easter. Me and Aunt Rhonda always had our Easter outfits made.
Who was the
Um,
best dresser out of y'all? Out of the group?
Probably Aunt Fatima was. Fatima, I mean, she had money. She had this boyfriend who was giving her all kinds of
She
stuff.
wouldn't share the money.
Well, I mean, we. It's not like we were poor. We weren't poor.
Hmm.
Anything we because if we needed something, we could get it. You know, I mean,
How
when we
were
wanted
y'all?
our outfits, we got our outfit. Man, around we go. We'd even have certain things made. If we wanted something
Where were
that
y'all getting money from?
my mother.
So she'll just give you money.
Well, we had an allowance.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she gave us an allowance, and I was the neighborhood babysitter. So I always had money, because I love kids. I love to babysit. So I was like, always I had people all over the streets who would ask me to babysit. So I always had money, and I even remember um, doing ironing and cleaning for this woman so that I could make money. I always was doing some little job. Yeah,
So Fatima, she was the best dresser.
Fatima, and she and her hair, she always had her hair and her clothes. Yeah, Fatima knew how to dress. I didn't care about that kind of stuff, to be honest. I did not care. And Rhonda, like I said, she was always into craziness as anyway. And she always had some boyfriend who would give her money and pay for things. But I mean, like I said, we did not, we didn't want for anything. My mother had a good job, and then Marshall was always there to help out, or any of our other boyfriends who
So
came.
um,
Yeah,
what about any like social groups when Vietnam was going on? You had the Panthers and other groups going
yeah. Well, I would say so. Maybe that was more.
a little later.
Yeah, that had to be a little later, because that was I remember this guy when I was in high school.
Yeah, what
He,
was your first boyfriend? Matter of fact, we didn't get to that.
I would think it was probably this guy who was not really a boyfriend, but wanted to be a boyfriend. He invited me it was the Republic of New Africa. I may have been 15 or 16. Come to find out, this guy was a substitute teacher in our school. So I didn't have boyfriends. I had friends. I didn't have boyfriends. My first real boyfriend, I would say, was probably Clayton.
Did y'all go to
You
the same school?
No, we went college. That was in
Oh, that was
college.
in
That
college.
was in college.
Okay, so
Yeah, I
but
didn't.
before then, so no
No,
social.
no. I mean, I would go out, but I remember this one guy. I remember this to this day. I went out with, and you know how they always trying to get you to sleep with them. I remember telling this guy that I was really a man, And I swear, Sully, I had this elaborate story. And I told him that, and he was just appalled. And so that's how I got rid of him. But but I would go out. I never went out by myself. At one time with my friend, one of our friends, and thought I liked him a little bit, but I don't know. It was always when if you got too close, it was like. It was I wasn't really interested because I was more interested in I wanted to get to school.
What was it about school and stuff that you were so into?
I liked learning, and I loved I loved history. I loved you. I think I told you about. I was always the teacher's pet now, and so I always remember. This was in elementary school, and it may have been the fifth or sixth grade. But there was the one teacher who really, he just thought I was, and he really liked Mom too. He thought I was just the best student. And one day, this other student in the class started talking to me. And I always remember this guy grabbed the student, threw him across the floor. And, it made such an impression.
Was he talking to you in a bad way?
No, he was just talking to me, and maybe the teacher didn't feel he should have been talking. But I remember him throwing that child, snatching him up and throwing him across the room. And I was always, like I said, because I always focused. I remember when I was I was taking typing, and everybody in the class, they just had, because the teacher told us, said, "Oh yes, my wife's name is Rebecca, and I was the best student, and the other kids never liked me. I was always, because I always had the curve too, because sometimes teachers were great on the curve,
and you would mess up
and I'd mess up the curve.
Oh,
but and I kept saying, well, what do you want me to do? You want me to and I always remember I took classes like realty, learning math, and I knew how I could tell you how to buy a house, amortization, what you need to do. I wish I had known more. I could remember a lot of that stuff. But yeah, I took a lot of math related classes. I love math. I went to, when I was in high school, I went to this programming class at Wayne State University where it taught you how to program and use computers. I loved computers even back then. And that was in the 60s. So yeah, I wasn't dating. I didn't date. And it's probably to my detriment because, when I did start dating, the guys were not the greatest.
Okay. Well, we'll get to that. So, were you bullied in school, or did the kids try to bully you? You say they didn't really like you too much.
No, I wasn't well liked. As a matter of fact, one guy did ask me to the prom, but I never went to my prom. I always regretted that, but never went to my prom. But because I was ready to go to college, go to school. I was working, and I just was more focused on doing that.
What was your first job?
Oh, it was working at this grocery store. I think I worked one day and they fired me.
Why?
Because I don't know what I did wrong, but I think I was so nervous that I may not have, added up the receipt right. Yeah. That was my first job. First job.
They fired you on the first.
Yeah.
One day.
I was babysitting and things like that.
Yeah.
But that was my first job. Yeah, they fired me the first day. That was
so what
shocking.
So what was your next job? Because you say you were working and going to school.
Well, I worked at, what was the name of it? Was a restaurant, Stouffer's. Was it Stouffer's? Because I started working at Stouffer's restaurant just before I went to college. And I think who else was working? Fatima was working at this place called Fox and Hounds. And I mean, Fatima was coming home because
She was
first
for waitresses.
she was a waitress. Fox and Hounds is really upscale. It's one of the best restaurants in Pontiac, and she was it was right outside of Pontiac. And I mean, Fatima was coming home like at that time with like $75, $100 in tips. And at Stouffer's, I'm barely making $20 in tips, you know. But yeah, so I think that was my second job. Stouffer's. I mean, not was it Stouffer's? It was a restaurant, and I was a waitress. And yeah, I did okay with that. I think I worked there for 3 months before I went to college.
So for the most part, it was just the three of you
Mhm.
growing up.
Yeah, just me, Aunt Rhonda, and Aunt Fatima. And my mom had a 3 bedroom. Really, it was a 4 bedroom house, but there was a room next to hers that was sort of like a porch. Um, but me and Aunt Rhonda shared a room. Aunt Fatima had her own room, which we always talked about it to this day. Aunt Fatima was fascinating when you think about it. I mean, she really had her whole life planned out and together. And she was always telling these elaborate stories and stuff. And me and Aunt Rhonda shared the same room. And I always remember one of our good friends we kept in the closet, let him stay in our closet because he couldn't, he was having trouble at home. And my mom never knew about that. I mean, he stayed in our closet. And, we always had the house because it was us three girls. We always had a lot of people in the house, and I was always trying to get people out of the house before my mom got there. So yeah, there was always something going on at our house. I mean, these three females, we always had a bunch of people there all the time.
So now you're moving on to college. What year did you start?
I graduated in 71 from high school.
Mm-hmm.
Mackenzie. Now, we were all known as Fatima's sister. I mean, Fatima Roseanne's sisters.
That's what
yeah, because she was well known there because she was always dressed. She was dating this,
mm-hmm.
guy who everybody knew was a drug dealer, so yeah, so she was really well known. Now, I will say that there was a lot of jealousy towards her at that school. So people pretty much left us alone.
What who this drug dealer is?
Oh, what was it? She knows. I can't remember his name, but he was. Yeah. But so was, Clayton. I didn't find this out. Clayton knew. Clayton was the one who told me about him, that this guy is a big drug dealer that your sister is dealing with. But yeah.
Okay, so 71.
71, I graduated. Mackenzie was an interesting school because it was they bus Black students. So go back real quick.
Mm-hmm.
My school was predominantly white, elementary school. I was the only Black student in my class for the fifth, when I was in fifth. So they had 5A and 5B. So I got there in 5B. I was the only Black in my class.
Were you aware of
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They make sure you know that. My teachers and everything, the students, I didn't have, like I said, I didn't have any friends except for these two white guys who nobody seemed to like either. I don't know why. They were nice guys. But anyway, yeah, I didn't have any friends. And even the teachers treated me like I was some charity case. Even I mean, it was just really
Like
ugly.
what?
They I don't know. I mean, like I said, we didn't need it. I didn't never need it. I always dressed well and
They
everything.
wouldn't grade you different when you
Yeah,
took
they
it.
would. They
They
would.
would.
Yeah. I mean, they would make sure you knew that
You were.
you weren't like everybody else. I remember going on field trips and you'd hear the student making jokes about Negroes and stuff. And the teachers, yeah, them. I remember that one white teacher I had. She was just, I don't know, it was almost like they were trying to uh, act as if they were there to help you, as if you needed help. When you didn't need that kind of help, you just needed somebody to treat you fairly. you know. So yeah, it was an interesting thing. And then my when I got into the what no, I was in 5A, and then when I got in 5B, there was another black student there, and we became lifelong friends. And I can't remember his name now. we became he and he could tell you horror stories how he would be chased home because he didn't live in our neighborhood. He lived a little ways. And he said being chased home and beat up and, you know, things thrown at her. We had stuff thrown at our window. Our windows were broken in our house. People would throw things and call names, and yeah, my mother would be out there on the front porch telling people off. You're not gonna drive me off of this. I remember mom was out. You're not gonna. She would go out there screaming at the neighbors.
But that wasn't traumatizing to you. You don't think, or you just was.
It was the '60s. I think you are aware of racism. We have been dealing with it all of our lives. There,
So it was like
yeah,
normal part of it.
yeah. The thing is, my mother. My mother was the kind of person she was going to speak up and speak back. And she would come to the school if there was any incident. She would go. I always remember going out and getting into it with one of the neighbors down the street, and basically, and my mother wasn't the kind of person that cussed people out, but she cursed this woman. She was just not like, she was very proper in many ways, but no, you didn't mess with her kids. You did not mess with my mother's kids, and she told people, because this one woman said she was gonna beat Rennie out Rhonda because Rhonda was doing something crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And oh boy, that just set my mom off, and it was like, this is not a. And so people pretty much left me alone. But they would be saying, "Oh, it's getting dark out here." Then you'd hear them call the N word and stuff like that. It was constant, but it's like that's because my mom worked. I mean, we were always out there on picket lines. We were always out there, um, working with black candidates for something. We were always doing something. I tell people
that was something your mom was into.
Yeah, she was always into civil rights. She was in elections. We were out there being at polls. So we were always political. One of the things I used to love, my mother would always, every Saturday, we may not eat all throughout the week, but every Saturday, we all sat down. She fixed breakfast. We all talked. We discussed any things that were going on. We talk about civil rights. We talk about, what we were going to do in terms. I mean, we were out there on polls, working for black candidates who were running for office. So she was very political like that. So It was like we were really aware of that. Now, the war, she never, I don't ever remember her talking about the Vietnam War. Civil rights, absolutely. My mother was a longtime member of the NAACP. She taught underprivileged young women um, business skills. She taught them how to do typing, shorthand, um, business writing. She did this for years, so we were always aware of that. We weren't maybe like I said, I don't ever remember us having the discussions about the Vietnam War or being out there picketing for that, except with our friends who we saw the impact of that. But then, so and then Nakua became, when she went to college, of course she became Miss Black Power and all.
She was.
Yeah. But see,
So-
my mother was still in this long-term relationship with Marshall. My mother was they were together for at least 30 years. When I went to college, Marshall would come up because I was his favorite out of all the kids. So, and he would always, support anything I was doing. And he even would come up to college when I went away to college. He would take me out to dinner, or he would take me. It was me and Aunt Rhonda who would go. We would go on trips with him and my mother. First time we went to Chicago, Second City, was when I was in high school. So yeah, he really introduced us. I remember he would take us out on his boat. We used to go water surfing, things like that. My mother was always into taking us to cultural events. And I was telling my friends in Senegal, I say, my mother took us to see Senegalese dancers when I was in elementary school. So, that was her thing. And I always felt that was important for my kids to do those kinds of things with too, even you don't have to have a lot of money to be involved in cultural, things. So Marshall was always there. Like I said, when I was in college, he'd come up and come to see me and take me to dinner or something like that. It was interesting because I remember one time he came, I was at a basketball game, and everybody looked around, see this white man coming to yeah. But yeah, so
what about, so she didn't talk about things like, or people like Malcolm X or Martin Luther King?
No, my mother was not. She was definitely a Martin Luther King side, a very nonviolent type person. No, I used to see the Nation of Islam and people, because, Detroit, that's where a lot of even Malcolm X and all of them came to Detroit. So you would always see them, like if I went to, because I used to take the bus to school, you would always see the sisters and the Muslims. And I always thought they were so clean and so, they seemed to be very, just very respectful.
Okay, so you go to college. And this is 71 or 72?
71.
71.
Yeah, I think 71, yeah.
Okay, so now you're in college.
Yeah.
What do you major in?
What was I majoring in? That's a good question.
Something that didn't matter.
I don't know what I majored in. I do. I started out as a sociology major, sociology and math. And I always felt proud that I was the only freshman in my dorm who was not on probation at the end of the semester. I always felt proud about that. I'm serious. I was the only freshman. And I remember telling, I always spoke my mind, but I remember telling some of this one particular group of fraternity guys, I say, I thought it was outrageous because I said, you're black men at this black college. Well, it wasn't a black college, but a lot of black students were there. And your goal in life is to see how many freshman women you can get on probation and get them kicked out of school. I just thought that was, and so I joined in with the Black Power students because I thought that was and I remember being at one of their parties where that was what they said, that's their goal. See how many, people they can get on probation. I don't know what. And so my sweet mate, was going out with the top basketball guy. So, because she was my sweet mate, she would always invite me to their parties and stuff. And it was just terrible what they were doing. It was, it was terrible. They were sleeping with these, and probably slipping them stuff, And I remember this one guy that I really liked, and I kept telling them, don't join the fraternities, because I thought what they were doing, the hazing.
Yeah.
But he joined, and I think that broke up and I really, really liked this guy, but that broke up I was like, no.
So was he like a boy? Was he a boyfriend, or was he just a guy that?
Yeah, no, he was sort of like a boyfriend. We went out a couple of times. I always remember that. I really, really liked him. But and I told him, I said, if you join the fraternity, that's it. I'm done. And he did. He said he felt he had to, which a lot of black men during that time, that's what they did. And I mean, they were doing hazing terrible. People were dying, being, the stuff they were doing. So that's when I joined the groups that were dealing with Black Power movement. And I remember we went and picketed the president of Eastern Michigan is where I went. We picketed his house because, asking for Black studies.
Did you ever feel conflicted having this white man that kind of helped raise y'all and looked out for y'all, and at the same time talking about white devils, I guess?
Yeah, but I wasn't like that. I was not, I always understood that there were good white people. I mean, even the fact that at the school I was, when I was in elementary and junior high, even though a lot of the white kids were really problematic, there was always a couple of white kids that were always really, really nice and all. So I really never had this hatred for white people or anything else. Plus I babysitted the two of the families that I babysitted. One was a white family, and the other was a mixed family. The husband, his mother was white and he was black. So, I had relationships with white, and like I said, I always had these relationships. And so that guy that I was telling you about, who was the teacher, he took me to the Republic of New Africa, at one of their talks, and I remember them saying, "Oh, we're gonna be blowing up, we're gonna be blowing up the gas stations as we tear down the world." And I remember him saying, because I remember asking him, I said, "Well, what about people who have white parents?" Because I was thinking of the guy I was babysitting. I said, "What if he's got a white mother, And I remember him saying, "Well, he's gonna have to make a choice, sister." I'm saying, what? Yeah, that was crazy, because the Republic of New Africa, they were interesting. Well, yeah, but so I understood there were good white people who white people not, you just can't put them all in there. And Marshall was just always so kind to me. And later in life, he did some really terrible things to my mom that I didn't find out about until I read some letters that she had after she passed. And he died. Um, he committed suicide, as a matter of fact. Maybe when he was in well, my mom was in her 70s and he was in his 70s. Because what he did to her was after all those years, I mean, they had been going together for a long time, and he was married all this time. He divorced his wife, and maybe a few months later, he married this other white woman. And I remember my mother in these letters. I didn't know all of this stuff, and I read the letters, and it was just terrible. But when he died, because he had gotten cancer or something, he called her, um, and just before he killed himself. Um, but like I said, he was always so kind to me. Now, Akua did not care for him because Akua was the militant one. She was on, she did not care for Marshall. But yeah, he was always very kind to me.
What was your relationship with Akua?
Well, of course, we were, sisters and all. I mean, our relationship didn't we didn't become more friendly until she went to college. I mean, we knew her and all of that. I mean, our family, Cool was always put on a pedestal, and we were always Eileen's sisters. Nobody knew our names, but we were Eileen's sisters. But so yeah, our relationship was okay. Because when I graduated from high school, I went to live with her. Okay. And she was going to help me find a job, and she wanted me to come up there and stay with her. But I didn't.
Okay, so
I know there's a lot of detail. I mean,
where did you meet Clayton?
I met Clayton at Eastern. Because he was a student.
Okay, he was a student. How did y'all meet?
He was a student. Yeah. I don't know how we met. Oh, I do. There was this Sadie Hawkins. I don't know if you've ever heard of Sadie Hawkins.
Yeah, the dance.
So they said you had to invite, girls had to invite. And I don't know why I invited him, but somebody had introduced us, so I invited him. And we started, going out when I was in college, and then I found out.
This is about freshman or?
Freshman year.
Yeah, this had to be freshman.
Yeah, and then I found out, it was crazy. I found out Clayton was smoking weed, and I remember that's when I said, I'm done. I really had a no drug policy. No, none. And it was like, I will never do this again. So we got back together, and then, yeah, that was a mistake. But then, because Clayton, because I didn't know he had been dealing with drugs. I didn't know he had been selling drugs too.
So how did you find out he was using drugs and selling drugs?
After we had gotten together, and had moved in Detroit, yeah.
Okay, so
yeah.
How long were y'all going together? For y'all?
Maybe about a year.
And then y'all moved in?
Moved in, yeah. Well, that's when I can't remember how all of this. Yeah, it was funny because we all moved into this apartment together. Me and Aunt Rhonda, Clayton, and somebody else, and we all moved in together. And that's I got pregnant with Vicky.
And then go back 72? To school.
72, yeah, because she was born in 72.
Yes.
And then go back to school. And that's when we all moved in together. I did not find out Clayton was dealing drugs until, or that he was still smoking weed and stuff until we moved. His father had two apartment buildings, and we moved in to the apartment when she was a baby, and that's when I found out not just that he was smoking weed, but that he was dealing crack and cocaine,
Okay, let's move back a little bit. So,
and that was like
so you
out of here.
were you the first out of the three of y'all to get pregnant?
No, that was strange. We all seem to have gotten pregnant around the same time because all of them are the same age.
Around the same age.
Yeah. First, Akua.
Oh, Akua, of course.
No, Helena is. And Halima is the oldest. Isn't she older than? Yeah, Halima is the oldest. And then Yao, and then David, and then Vicky. So they're all around the same age. Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
so
We all-
Fatima.
I'm Fatima.
Okay, wait. So
Mhm.
she she met Uncle Abadar, right?
No, Halima's dad is Bobby Davis.
Who is Bobby Davis?
That was who Fatima was dealing with. And
That was the drug dealer?
no,
Oh, okay.
no, she had stopped dealing with him, and that guy really did not take it well when she broke up with him. That drug deal, and we were all afraid for her, but Fatima was fearless in so many ways. But then she started dealing with Bobby Davis. I always used to call him that, Bobby Davis. He was always such a sweetheart, though. I love Bobby. Yeah, that's Helene's father, Bobby Davis.
What about Bobby Davis? Because the way you said
I don't know, he had this humor to him. He was always had this wonderful smile. He was just a really nice person, and he was always so kind to everybody. He's just a good guy. That didn't mean that he did anything with his life or.
Okay, so she was with Bobby Davis.
Bobby Davis.
Is that her first two kids?
No, that's just Helene's dad.
Okay.
Yeah, because the rest of her kids are by Uncle Abadar.
So she met Uncle Abadar before you met Clayton?
No.
Because I thought two were older than Vicky. It was Helena.
No. Okay. The four oldest kids are all around the same age. Vicky's the youngest out of all of them.
Okay.
David was born. I know Yao was born in September. Helene was born in April. Yao was born in September. Was David born in October? And Vicky was born, of course, in May. So she's the youngest.
So yeah, they all are around each other.
Around the same age, yeah. And no, Bobby Davis is Helene's dad. Okay. All the rest of her kids are by Abadar.
Okay, so what about Aunt Rhonda? Who was?
He was a sweetheart too, David. David's father's name.
His name was David as well.
Yeah, and he was really a sweetheart too. Really nice guys. Not Randy, and I always loved the guys that she was. They were always such wonderful, and she just did them dirty. But they were all so wonderful and so nice, and they really were trying to do. And David's family is still amazing. They still keep in touch. They would treat me like I was family too. David's family is wonderful. They really are. Nina's father died. I mean, Nina's been about 10 years, even more younger than David. But her dad was really a sweetheart too. and he died. Yeah. But yeah, Randy always had such great boyfriends, and they always became good friends with me and Father. We just, but yeah. So
before Vicky came, how
mhm.
was you and Clayton's relationship like?
It was not good because, like I said, Clayton had a really difficult um,
Upbringing?
situation with his father. His family, like his father, became wealthy after Clayton worked with him on developing his business, and then he sort of cut him off. I mean, the guy was horrible anyway. And come to find out, he had tried to hit on Fatima, but yeah, it was just not. Those people were just not nice people.
So that kind of affected you and his relationship early on.
Well, Clayton, I think he was. It affected him the way what happened with his father. Now, I think like I said, I didn't know Clayton was still dealing with drugs after we got together, because that was, my no drugs.
Mhm.
But I found out later that, yeah, he had been dealing with drugs even then, and so our relationship was not good. I mean, I left Clayton a number of times. I should
Within that first year?
Mhm. Oh yeah, because I just, he was just not. He had some emotional issues too. So, yeah, it's unfortunate that he just never got over the way he was treated by his dad, and he even told his father that. But those people were just cruel, cruel.
So
Um,
as y'all start having, kids start coming
mhm.
involved, that kind of make the bridge a gap between you and your sisters, or y'all still were close?
Oh, we've always been
Y'all were
close.
still
Oh yeah,
close,
yeah,
talking,
yeah,
everything,
yeah,
seeing
yeah,
each other,
yeah, yeah.
kids playing with each other.
Clear kids. Um, my kids were, uh, you know, really. Vicky was just a beautiful
Yeah,
child.
I guess we could lead up.
Yeah,
Okay, so
Vicky, and
you,
I mean, to
you,
the point where, I mean, Fatima used to tell me, she said, I'm not taking her anywhere, because she said people treat her like, she said, they act as if I can't be related to this child. Yeah, she did. She told me. She said people are just really ugly. I mean, when I told her that, I said they do the same thing to me. But she was such a beautiful child that I would take her to the store, and people would line up to see her.
oh,
When
wow.
I'm walking, we would walk down the street and people would stop their cars and get out. She was truly a beautiful little baby. Um, but her grandparents, so her grandmother, they were just real. Like I said, those people really had problems. I had to tell Clayton to tell his mother, because she started watching Vicky while I was working, and I would come and get her, and she'd have all of her clothes changed, her hair done differently. And I'm saying, because this woman done washed my child up and switched her clothes out. And I just had to tell her to stop doing that. 'Cause, and she was, all the pictures I had of Vicky and stuff. So Vicky was just a gorgeous child. So I think in many ways she was just treated a lot different than even the other kids. Although all the kids they were, the first ones, they were all spoiled.
Yes.
But yeah, so Vicky was, and then Clayton,
How did having Vicky? How did that
mhm.
change your relationship, or did it affect your relationship in any way?
Clayton was going downhill quickly
Due to
with the
marijuana?
drugs. Just Clayton would sit in, when I would be at work or something, so his dad had given him two cabs, so he'd have people driving for him. So he wasn't out there doing so. Sometimes he would go out if he wanted to make some extra cash. So he had people working for him. So he would sit at home smoking weed. And then that's when I found crack. And when I found the crack but this was after IU. But yeah, he just refused to interact with Vicky at all. So I don't know. Like I said,
that fatherhood
no.
or anything just never clicked in.
So we had a 2-bedroom apartment. He set up the 1-bedroom. No, it was 3 bedrooms. He set up the 1-bedroom where he would just go in there and smoke weed the whole time. And because I told him he couldn't do it in the house, so that's where he would go. I mean, literally, that's what he would do. So it was just me and her most of the time. And then, I don't know, Clayton just, like I said, I think he just allowed the drugs and his dad to get to him. He was always talking about how his dad had told him always talking about how his dad had told him how they were going to work together, because he really had started him all in that business, telling them how to do it and working with him on it. But his father was just, those people were just not good people. So I just think that he just did not. I think his emotional level just never set in, to the point where I remember I told Vicky, because she kept telling me, oh, you left my dad and this and that. I told her, the main reason why I left Clayton, because I remember that he told me I was going to have to pay him to take her. She was really sick one day, to the hospital. And I said, are you crazy? This is your child. I mean, it was things like that he was doing. He just was not, he had just checked out.
So you would have to pay for the cab.
Yeah.
His cab.
Yes.
To take her
to the, and I was saying, no, that's not going to happen. If I'm gonna have to pay somebody, I'm gonna pay a cab driver. This is your child. I mean, it was things like that he would do, and it was just,
So okay.
He wasn't a physically abusive. I wasn't going for that.
What about so then Ayub comes along.
Yeah. And Ayub had some issues, of course, with his legs. And then I think his stuttering came about behind. And Clayton was just, like I said, he was not very responsive as a father. And so I just realized that it was not a good situation. And literally what happened, when I found out he was smoking crack, and I found that in the house.
He was smoking crack?
Smoking crack.
Okay.
And he had cocaine.
Because I know you said he was selling it. I
didn't know he was smoking. Yeah. Okay. It was bad enough that he was selling it, but when I found out he was smoking it himself, that was like, okay, time to get out of here. And I had called Aunt Rhonda. I think I told you this story before. I called Aunt Rhonda to come get me. And she never liked him anyway. So Rennie came in, and we were packing up everything to leave. And he told me I wasn't going anywhere. And I'm, ignoring him. Yeah, I'm getting out of here. I found your crack, your cocaine. I'm not dealing with that. You smoking weed. I'm not dealing with that. So we were, Vicky sitting there, waiting for us. She's crying, and we're shouting back and forth and all. And he hits Aunt Rhonda. And Randy will tell you, I saw blood. I just saw I don't know. I blacked out because I grabbed him. I grabbed him and held him down. And I told Randy to go get me a knife. I remember saying, "Go get me a knife. I'm gonna kill him." He jumped up. I don't know how he got out of my grip, grabbed Vicky, and ran out the door. Took her over to his mother's house. I told his mother, I said, "Give me my child back. I'm getting out of here. Your son's a drug addict. You all know he's a problem, and you have not done anything to help him." And I got her back maybe couple of days later.
How did you end up getting it back?
I went over to their house, told them, "Give me my child." Mm-hmm. And yeah, he hit Randy and knocked her down. No, he hit her, and I don't know what came over me. I just knocked him down and held him there. And I remember telling Randy, "Go get me a knife," because I would have probably been in jail because I was seeing. I lost it because you hit. Yeah, I went over to Randy's house, but brought.
So were y'all ever married?
No.
So y'all were never married?
No, which was a good thing in many ways, because Clayton was. Now, I foolishly behind the community when I did, because during that time I left, I became Muslim and all, and he told, and he said he was going to be Muslim. And so they told me, "Oh, sister, you need to go back and deal with him." And I remember telling them, "No, this guy is a drug addict. That's the problem." But I did anyway. And the first night that I was back, he was still dealing with drugs. And I refused to sleep with him. And I slept on the floor in the front room, and I was making my plans to get the heck out of there. Okay. But yeah, but Clayton never did. And there was a whole incident where he got shot.
Yeah, let's back up a little bit.
Yeah.
My
life has been crazy.
We're going to get back to that. So at this time, because I thought I heard a story that you met Uncle Abadar first. Is that true? Or
did I meet Uncle? No, I don't think I met him first. I don't think so. Okay. I know, but me and Abadar used to talk. I mean, literally for hours. This was after he married Fatima.
Okay,
that's how I became Muslim.
How did they meet?
I don't know.
You don't know how they meet?
The guy Fatima was married before that, Sulaiman.
Yeah.
That Abdul Shakur had the nerve to say something good about. I said that guy was abusive. He used to beat Aunt Fatima.
What was his name?
Sulaiman.
Oh, Sulaiman. Okay, so is that who introduced Aunt Fatima to Islam?
Yeah.
Okay. How did
Fatima?
Because she became Muslim before you.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
That's why I wanted to back up.
So I think that's a good question. I used to know all of this stuff, so but I think Fatima knew some sisters,
okay,
who used to talk to her. Bilquis was one.
Mm-hmm.
There's another sister who's really well known, really brilliant. So there were a group of Muslims. Bilquis was one, and a couple other sisters who were all, in school, and they met with Fatima, and I think they the ones who started talking to her about Islam and all. And one of the women, her husband knew Sulaiman, and I think that's how Fatima met him.
And he was abusive.
He was terribly abusive. And I remember contacting the brothers because she would come to my house. I'd be beat by this.
And this is before you became
This
Muslim.
before I became Muslim.
Okay, and you contact the brother.
Yeah, and I would contact the brother and say, "What the heck is going on? Why are you all letting this happen?" Oh, sister, she's not leaving in the right way. Oh,
She's not leaving the right way.
yeah. She doesn't come to them. She comes to me. And they were saying, "Sure, we need her to come." And I was done with those brothers because I thought it was so. What does it have to do? What does that mean that she's not leaving in the right way? Anyway, yeah, this guy was so abusive, and it was always, "Oh, you made me do this," kind of thing.
So she gets away from him.
She would come to me. The last time he beat her up, she did go to them, and they dealt with him, and they did divorce them.
They divorced him.
And I think it's the sisters who, because they were all going to Wayne State or the University of Michigan, and different schools. Because Bilquis was going to the Catholic University, which I can't think of the name of. So anyway, they told her about Abu Dar. So she met Abu Dar because Abu Dar used to be. He was at Wayne State, and he was head of the Black Student Union there. And so he was in school and working on, I think he was working on his master's degree and all of that. So, Abu Dar was such a, so different, such a breath of fresh air. And I remember us sitting for hours and talking about Islam and how the benefits, the things that he has learned. And they got married and all. Abu Dar was just, he was just so different. First of all, he was educated. And you know me, I am a snob when it comes to that. Got to have some education. So he was really educated. He spoke well. He talked about men and women and stuff like that. He was just, we would have long debates and everything. And Abu Dar is really the one that convinced me about Islam, But even after that, I will say, after they told me, "Oh, Clayton's, he's saying he's going to accept. So I think, sister, you need to go." And I kept telling him, "Don't believe him." But I said, "Okay, I'm gonna do the first night." He clowned, and I was plotting myself. So when I moved away from Clayton, and he was threatening me and all of that, I moved further away from the community too, and I had really started moving away from Islam. And it was Abu Dar really who finally, came and talked to me and everything, and moved me, told me I could, stay with them and everything. And that really is what helped me in my deen. Because Clayton was threatening me, he would come to and I didn't want him coming to Fatima's house. So I moved away, and he would come over there banging on my doors and everything. Every time I think about that, because I had started to learn how to shoot. I had my own gun and stuff. So he's lucky I didn't kill him.
So how did he end up getting shot?
So the kids were Vicky and Ayub. We had gotten an apartment. We were living in the duplex. Bilquis was living at the bottom. I was living at the top. And this is before, Abdul Shakur and all of that.
Was it before Sadiq as well?
Was it before Sadiq? No, it wasn't.
Okay, so let's...
Yeah. Yeah, it was before Sadiq.
Okay.
Yeah, it was before Sadiq. Yeah, because I was living in that. Yeah. No. because I was living in another place with Fatima and Abu Dar lived downstairs and I lived upstairs. And that was when yeah, no. I'm trying to remember all of because I didn't move so many times. But yeah, I was living over Bill Keys when that happened. So he had wanted to come and see Vicky, and we had told him that only in certain circumstances, because Clayton was, like I said, he was still dealing with drugs and all of that, and the brothers had basically, Sully. The thing about my Islam, I have never been the kind of person that the brothers say this, so I'm gonna do it except when those things I didn't want to, I didn't want to take responsibility for. So they kept saying, "Oh, sister, you shouldn't let the kids go and see him. He's non-Muslim," and I kept saying, "This is their father. I want them to have this relationship." So I was always of that mindset that no, that may be what you all think is the best thing, but I don't think that. Okay. So anyways, Ayub, the brothers had said, "Oh, you shouldn't let him go," and all of that. So I let them go. I let the Vicky go, and came back. And the brothers, I remember, and then Abu Dar too, was basically telling him he could not see the kids any longer, and I thought that was wrong.
Yeah. Well, I'm not judging. Go ahead.
Well, I thought it was wrong, even though Clayton was still doing a lot of really problematic things. He was still their father.
Right.
And I didn't think he would do anything to hurt them. Although Clayton, like I said, he never took any responsibility for them. But that's when the brothers had told him he couldn't come. And he came over. He brought a gun. And and he and Abu Dar, I didn't know this till years later. He and Abu Dar were shooting at each other. And Abu Dar did shoot him. But the police never got involved, so I don't know. I didn't know what had happened. But I always felt, no, that's not a good thing to keep the kids away from. So, there was a lot of things that the Jamaat was doing, like that whole thing with Aunt Fatima, not involving themselves in this abuse that she was taking, and this whole thing of kids shouldn't do this or kids should be doing that. That's just not something I was going to do. And I was considered very much the difficult person, because it was I'm not doing this. Really, I was the last person in the community to full veil, and I never felt comfortable doing it. And I felt like it was sort of like, everybody's doing it, so we need to do this, and it never set well with me. But so that's how. They were shooting at each other. I didn't know he had brought a gun, but yeah. And so Abu Dar said years later that, he shot him. But it's, Sully, there were so many things with the community that turned out to be really problematic. And I talked to Sister Jawari about this all the time. And I told her, and I do feel this, people thought they were doing the right things, even though oftentimes they were the wrong things. It was their intention was not to do harm. Their intention was, I think, to, do an aspect of Islam that they felt was proper, but they did not have any training, education, or or even the knowledge. And so a lot of things that they did that I just wouldn't let them do to my kids. And I was an outlier. But I wasn't the only one. There were other sisters who were like, that's not happening. You're not doing that. And I was just like that. And I remember telling a couple of sisters, I thought they were abusive,
So, okay. What did you know about Islam? You just knew what was told to you, or were you actually taking the time to find out for yourself?
Oh yeah, I've always studied. I mean, even my first paper speech that I did in college was on Kareem Abdul-Jabbar when he was Lew Alcindor.
Yes.
And so I had looked into Islam back then. And then, of course, like I said, I was in Detroit, always seeing the Nation of Islam. It was not something I particularly liked, partly because it was, white people, the devil type thing. I could not get that, never resonated with me, primarily because, like I said, we're dealing with white people all the time. And some are good, some are bad. A lot of the black people we were dealing with had some issues themselves. So, so I knew, I read, and that's why when me and Abu Dar, we would have these long discussions. I mean, literally, we would be up 4 and 5 hours having these discussions. Then I would talk to Bill Keys, the other woman, Benta.
How did you meet Bill Keys?
They were all a part of the community.
Okay, so she was part of the community before you.
Yeah. Okay. Bill Keys had been Muslim, and she was married to Abdul Shakur. When I moved, I lived over there in my apartment. When I was married to Abdul Malik.
Okay, so how did you meet Abdul Malik?
So when I became Muslim, they always talk about somebody, marriage and everything. So there was, there was this guy in Dearborn, this Arab guy in Dearborn. That's Nafiz. I'll call him back later. There was this guy in Dearborn, this Arab guy who had made intentions and asked about me. And, at the time, they were telling me, oh, sister, this is a good brother. You need to really consider this. And I had thought about it, and that passed. Plus I had 2 kids, and I did not want to be, I wanted to make sure, because like I said, Vicky and Ayub, they were such cute kids. There was always somebody in the Jamaat who had Ayub. I mean, the brothers loved him like he was, just the brothers loved him. And everybody was telling me, oh, this brother, he saw Vicky and he just thought she was and he asked about you. So, it didn't sound like they were interested in me. Too many of these brothers were interested in my kids for me. And then Abdul Malik, everybody told me, oh, he's a good brother, this and that. And and Abdul Malik was very handsome. That was always the thing. Oh, he's so handsome, and he'd ask about you and this and that. So I met up with him and all, and we had a good talk and everything. The real problem what happened with Abdul Malik was, which I had told him. I had told him before I got married to him that I was not interested in polygamy. That was a deal breaker.
Okay.
So a week after I get married to him, he's talking about getting a second wife and stuff. It was like that was it. Yeah, that soured our relationship. Because as far as I'm concerned, if you betrayed me, that's it. I can't do anything with you ever. So yeah, so our relationship started to go bad within
A week.
a week. Yeah, and then and that's when he um, maybe about 4 or 5 months after that um, he and Rashida got together and yeah, so Abdul was a player. That's all. It's because he was a handsome guy, and everything. But I had already had gotten pregnant and all. So after I had Sadiq, it was see you, bye. And I was not. I no. Um, we remained friends though, but Abdul Malik was such a mess. He was such a mess. He got two. He had a number of women, and I just plus you know, and I've always been interested in people who were intelligent. Abdul Malik was just not that. He was an attractive person, but he wasn't intelligent. And he tried. But he had problems with the fact that I was smarter than him. So it just didn't work. But he was a good father.
He was a good father.
He was a really good father until he got with that white woman, and I don't know what happened.
Well, when did he get with the white woman?
This was years later. Sadiq was like maybe about 10 or 11, 12. Yeah.
Okay, so this was later.
Yeah, this was later when we had moved to DC.
Wait, before we go further, can you say something nice about Clayton and something nice about Abdul Malik? So we don't.
Well, Abdul Malik was a good father.
So people won't think you're just bashing these.
He was a good father. He was very kind, and he was a very attractive man, and everybody said that about him. But yeah, he was a good father. He really loved Sadiq. I just don't know what happened. And he was really, really, the thing about Abdul Malik that I think was really different than Abdul Shakur. Abdul Malik really took time with Ayub. He really was kind to him and spent time with him and treated him like he was his child. He would come get Ayub with Sadiq all the time. So he was just and he was really good with Vicky. She loved Abdul Malik too. He was a good person. Yeah, that I will say that about Clayton. Like I said,
let's try to see if we can.
I got something good to say about Clayton. Well, I just feel that Clayton was a brilliant young man who allowed.
So he's a brilliant young man.
He's a brilliant young
okay,
man.
well, yeah,
he was.
Yeah.
He was very smart. He almost finished his degree before he dropped out of school.
Well, let's just stop that.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
He was smart. Yeah.
Very smart. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So so you and Abdul Malik divorced.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then what happened after that? So you go back to he was in Detroit, right? 'Cause I always known Sadiq to be in Chicago for some.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's when things just fell apart when they moved to Chicago. And Sadiq said his dad, after he married this white woman, things just changed, and they moved to Chicago, and they used him in many ways as a babysitter, child care worker, and really didn't spend a lot of time with him. So he really, it was not good. But so when I was when did this happen? So he came. Abdul Malik came to get Sadiq. This was when I was in DC. Was it in DC? He came and got Sadiq, and he came and got Ayub, and he took them to Disney World. Took them to Chicago with him. I don't know if it was Disney World. Took them somewhere. But that was the thing. Clayton was. I mean, Abdul Malik was such a good person in many ways that he could have came and just got Sadiq, but he didn't. He came and he got Ayub too and took him with him. He was just like that kind of thing, kind of person. And I was fine with letting Ayub go because Abdul Shakur just was not the kind of person to really, treat somebody like that. And Ayub really did like Abdul Malik too because of that. So yeah, it's I mean, Sadiq still is in touch with his father too. So that's a good thing. And he keeps in touch with him.
Okay, so
Uh,
let's go to
okay. I gotta go home. So
okay,
go ahead.
okay, we'll speed it up.
Okay.
We'll speed it up. All right, so now you're back. It's just you, and now it's you and 3 kids,
Mm-hmm.
and you're living upstairs from Rhonda and them at the time.
No, I'm living upstairs from
Fatima.
Bill Keys.
Oh, Bill Keys.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so how did my boo Abdul Shakur come along?
Well, they live downstairs. And I always used to have kind of long conversations with Abdul Shakur. And then I moved from there to a place that was in the neighborhood, but I moved to this other place that was a little bigger. And what's his name? Abu Muhammad.
Mm-hmm.
Abu Muhammad was Abu Muhammad was always sort of like the person who looked after me. He just took it upon himself to make sure that I was taken care of. And in some ways, I think Abu Muhammad was the one who really, really took time out to talk to me. And he understood the kind of person I was. So anyway, he kept telling me, "Oh, Abdul Shakur is interested in marrying you," and I kept saying, I don't think so." And I remember he had nagged me and nagged me and nagged me for months about marrying. And I kept telling him, I said, "Abu Muhammad, you just want to get rid of me. You don't want to take care of me anymore." And he would laugh and everything. So, I mean, I'm serious. He would bug me all the time. All the brothers interested. And so one day I said, "Okay, Abu Muhammad, let's go ahead and see what happens." And I remember this. I always tell people, "Abu Muhammad, you married Abdul Shakur. I didn't really marry him." Because you the one that kept pushing him on me. Things went bad for Abdul Shakur and I the first night. And yeah. And to be honest, after I had been in 3 of these relationships, I kept saying the third one, I'm going to try to stick it out, do whatever it takes. I used to listen to that. What's that? A song, Love TKO. It talks about 3 times. Yeah. So I had been saying for years, I said, third time, I'm going to try to make this work. So that's why I stayed in there. And I remember calling Abu Muhammad that first night saying, "This is a mistake, and I don't think this is a good thing." And
After the first night?
First night.
You don't want to go into details.
No, I won't say, but yeah, the first night it was like, mm-mm. And part of that is that Abdul Shakur has never been a very how I mean I don't want to say bad things, but he just has does not have a, an empathetic type of personality, and I could tell. So anyway, Abu Muhammad talked me into just let it go. Let's see how it goes. We'll go, and I said okay. So yeah, I stayed in the relationship as long as I possibly could. After Hawa, and it was even before Hawa, I had been making plans to get out. Because at the certain point, you're just saying to yourself, "This is just not." I know my life can be better than this. And Sully, the thing is, I had been saying that for years. When we lived in that apartment building, I used to say this.
The one that y'all call the building.
Yeah, the building.
Yeah.
I used to say this is not, this is not how I was raised. This
Right.
is not the way I want to raise my kids. I don't want to be in this situation. We were living in a 1-bedroom place.
When did he?
1 bedroom with all of the kids.
When did he meet Sister Khadija?
You always knew Abdul Shakur had an interest in somebody because he's always was looking and had an interest in somebody because he never wanted to be responsible for anything anyway. So he started teaching Arabic at the mosque, and he started getting all dressed up and ready to go. And somebody had there's a sister over there, and so that's that. So it was sort of inevitable. But Abdul Shakur was married before he married. I think he was married before he married Bilquis, because there was another sister, because they always talk about the son he had.
Well, did you watch the interview? You never watched the one I did with him?
No, what did he said talk about that child?
Yes, he did.
Oh, okay. Oh, it may have been after they were married or something.
Well, you just don't.
Yeah, I'll never mind.
Watch
anyway,
my footage thing.
Yeah. I don't know what you haven't done, but anyway, so it was just Abdul Shakur has always had. He is smart. He can learn languages. He's Quran, Hadith. He knows his faith, religion, except he uses it in ways that benefit himself. So he was always if he had been a better person, I think I would have stayed, because Abdul Shakur is very smart. He's very, and that I've always appreciated. I love, Abdul Shakur and I even now can have wonderful conversations about history and politics, because he's really perceptive. He's really smart, and I did love that about them. And I always say, I think I'm trying to remember those times that I could say I loved Abdul Shakur. There were not many times that I could say that. And when you would say it, there was always something that he would, show you that, that was the wrong thing to be thinking. But so it's just I don't know if it's his childhood or what, but he just never understood. and I don't know how to say it. He just never understood that there are things you have to be self-aware, that you have to have empathy, you have to have a concern about other people, especially in your life. And I just feel in so many times, Abdul Shakur has just been just unthinking, and I think the whole thing with Khadijah was part of that. Um, he just never, what they say with people, you need to read the room. He never seemed to understand that you got to read the room, you got to understand. And so he kept us in this really abusive situation, and it never bothered him because he wasn't the person being abused. And so there was never any loyalty. And I always remember the sisters always said, they said, Khadijah will fight for him, Bill Keys loves him, and Rukiah is loyal to him. And I think that's where our relationship just broke apart, when I saw that there was no loyalty. There was no sense that, this person, he would let Khadijah say all kinds of things about me, really. And it was just, without him saying, this is not right. You should, Rukiah has done this or that. It was just no sense of loyalty, no sense of concern for my kids, my feelings, or anything. And so it just, I think it started on day one, and I should have read the room, understood that is going to be your life. But sometimes the lessons are hard.
Yeah.
But I think the lessons were needed in order for me to get to the point where I am now.
So when y'all moved to, how did you feel about moving to New Orleans or leaving Detroit? I mean, your family was in Detroit. You were leaving your kind of safe haven at that point. But I mean, Uncle Abudar and Aunt Fatima was coming.
There, yeah.
Oh, were they there already or coming?
I think they were coming.
Okay.
They were coming.
Yeah, because I talked to Uncle Abudar. He told me a story about that.
Oh yeah, that was
real good story. I wish I could get an interview with him.
Abudar's. I always tell people, don't say anything about Abudar or Abu Muhammad. Those two people they saved me in so many ways. Abu Muhammad especially. But so when we moved to New Orleans, Abdul Shakur moved us to New Orleans with an abusive woman, first of all. And then without him having any control over the situation. So he but when we first moved there, Abdul Shakur was working, making good money. We were doing okay, but he let Khadijah just destroy all of that. And it was more important for him to hang on to her and her abusive ways than it was to take care of the rest of the family. And that's always been an issue with him. It's always had his needs above, the larger the larger group. And it was unfortunate because he just ruined. He just, when they made Khadijah stay in New York and she got lashes for her abuse. Abdul Shakur, you would think this is something now. Think about this. What's happened? And the fact that, and the honest, they gave him lashes for the way he allowed her to abused me in many ways, because that's what happened. But that never sunk into him. So it just, and then when she did come back and they had basically divorced him, you know, they should go. They were sneaking around, and it was like, okay, that that showed me this guy is got a real serious problem, and I don't, and so yeah, that's when I went back to school. Even though I had Howard, I had pregnant with Howard. I was still in school, and then I got a job,
Wait,
and
was
I
that
was
the
going.
job at Tulane?
Mhm.
Okay, or before that, why did we end up going to DC?
Oh, because the situation with Khadijah had just gotten to, like I said, it was. Well, there were two things that happened. Remember, Vicky ran away
Hmm.
and went to Detroit. That really caused me a great deal of heartache. So it was really hard. And then Khadijah was being terribly abusive, to the point where she had told Abdul Shakur that I couldn't eat any of the food that she brought, and she was the only one bringing money into the house. And it was like,
What was her issue with you?
Khadijah never understood why Abdul Shakur stayed married to me. She would tell asking him that all the time. Anyway, so it was like this man is still sticking with her.
Hmm.
So I contacted Abu Muhammad.
Okay.
Abu Muhammad started sending me money, and he sent me food stamps. Um, that was how I was able to get you all diapers and food and everything. Because, why would you let somebody say that? Why was that okay
Hmm.
for you? And if you should go and just let it go on until finally, when Vicky left, I told Abu Muhammad, I got to get out of here. And I said, I'm going to lose my mind. And so he made the travel arrangements for us to go to DC. He wanted me to just stay a few months, and and they would work things out back home. But I went, I started, I got a job. Abu Mama said, "You're not supposed to have gotten a job." I got a job. I said, "I'm going back to school." And so, um, and I was doing these things. I was trying. I was not raised like this, Sully. I was not raised in poverty and letting my kids not have the things that I felt they needed to have,
Hmm.
and being in a stable environment. I wasn't raised that way. Even though my mom and my dad were together, I still wasn't raised like that. So anyway, I was like, no. And so I went to work so that I could get my kids things and stuff.
Well, continue talking.
Yeah, so that was what I was just not going to not do, anything while I was in DC. And he said he told me, "You're not supposed to be working." I said, "Abu Muhammad, I'm not sitting around doing nothing." Anyway, um, they convinced me to come back home. I got into the Urban League program. I started taking business classes there. They got me the job at Tulane, and I had just started. I mean, if I had, even though I had, excuse me, um, Howard, I went back to work and I went back to school. And I had, from the time I was pregnant with Howard, I had started planning to leave. I kept telling Abdul Shakur, I'm leaving. I'm leaving. He never believed I was going to leave until the trailer was in the driveway, and I drove. I put my stuff in there and drove away. We didn't even take beds. I just was getting out, and I meant that. So I had been planning my escape, so it was been for a long time. And he kept telling me all kinds of stuff. Oh, you're gonna be cursed, this and that. Fine, I'm out.
So okay, so that was you're talking about when you went to DC. Okay.
No, when I went to DC is when I got a job and I started looking into programs to get back in school. Yeah, I was planning to live in DC, and Abu Muhammad said, "Nope, you can't get a job. You can't be." And I told Abu Muhammad, "I am not sitting around. I can't."
So when you got okay, so you came back. When you came back, where were we living then?
In Algiers.
That was in
Remember
Algiers.
down the street from where Aunt Fatima living down there in Algiers.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, that little house.
Was things a little better then, or was it still the same?
It was still the same, but I was different.
Yes.
I had been planning. As soon as I got back, I started looking into programs, and that's when I applied for the Urban League, and I got into that. The Urban League business program, even though years later I found out the Black woman who ran it didn't want me in the program. She said, "Oh, we'll never be able to find her a job." Yeah, and so I started going to those classes, and Abdul Shakur was still doing his stuff, not doing anything, but I was single-minded. I was going to go back to school. I was going to get a job, get my kids, into a better environment, and get that. That's why when we moved to that house, remember that nice house we lived at in Terrytown?
Yes.
Yeah. And we had to leave from there and moved into that roach infested place.
Off of
that was I was not in Algiers, but
that was in Gretna.
Near Wabiggle.
Yeah, that was off. I can't remember.
Yeah.
The street, but I
Piggly Wigglies.
Off of Lafayette.
Yeah.
Off of Lafayette.
That was just the
bottom. The worst.
That was
they had water leaking, had a puddle on the ground.
I know.
Roaches, cockroaches.
I know.
Everywhere.
It was.
That was it was
dirty and all of that. And I kept saying, we got to get out of here. Plus, that was where Fatima and Bagel went off sleeping around and we're not going to school. And it became a real.
Yeah, because that was after Trinon Square, actually.
Yeah, that's what,
Because we had Trinon Square.
Trinon Square.
Then we moved to their house.
That house, which was really nice, that y'all tore up the backyard.
So how did you get the job at Tulane? Did you have to fudge your? No, you didn't fudge it a little bit?
No, I went to the Urban League program.
Okay.
And after that program, how long was that program? It was like 6 weeks. It was a long program, and I don't know if you remember, because I think you came to my graduation.
I did.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. They refused. The woman, she just didn't. I found this out later. She just did not like me. I was supposed to have gotten a certificate for having the best grades. There were two things I was supposed to have won that she just refused for having the best grades and for going the distance, so coming from further in terms of my life and career. But she refused. Anyway, so after I got that job, after I got that, they sent me on a bunch of job ads. And one of the last ones they sent me on was Amistad. And I remember Dr. Johnson. I met with him. He asked me if I knew how to use a dictaphone. It looked like pizza. It looked like the dictaphone looked like a recorder. So I said, oh, sure. And he said, okay, we'll go in here. He gave me oral history that he wanted me to transcribe. And I did it. And he told me before I got home, he had hired me. He told me that he had interviewed college grads. He had interviewed people who knew a lot of the work because I didn't know anything about Amistad. And he said, but I was the only one that knew how to use a dictaphone. And years later, I told him, I said, Dr. Johnson, I had no idea how to use a dictaphone, but I know how to use a recorder. So, yeah, he hired me.
Would you say working at Amistad Tulane changed your life?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It kind of gave you your freedom papers.
It did. Like I was, but you know what, Sully, in so many other ways, I always tell people this. But Islam, when I valued my Islam, is when things turned around for me. Because all that I had gone through, you would have thought, move away from that. But it was the Islam that had strengthened me, that, no matter what people were telling me, this or that, it just gave me a voice that I never had. And so getting that job at Amistad really changed my life. It was rough. It was hard. It was difficult because
on camera. It's all hello.
Oh, okay. Because I did not, I wasn't making much money. Dr. Johnson wasn't paying me much of anything. But it was the training I got from that place, and the fact that I could go back to school. And I will say, I always think about what I had to give up. And part of what I gave up is really raising my kids to be better Muslims. And I always think about that. Was that a good trade-off?
Yeah. So you start working at you start working at Tulane, and so now some money coming in. Did that change your relationship with Abdul Shakur? The fact that you were bringing in money and he was, sometimes he'd have work, sometimes he wouldn't.
I would say it helped. My relationship with Abdul Shakur, remember, had fallen apart before I had Howell. So technically it had fallen apart before I started at Amistad. So we didn't have much of a relationship after that.
But he was still back and forth.
Because he was still in you all's lives, but he wasn't really in mine.
Okay. So how he? Well, I guess that's the question for him. But all right. So Amistad. Then you decide. Well,
we were still moving around. it was still difficult.
Yeah.
There were times, to be honest, I'm going to say this on camera, that I had to take money from Amistad in order to get home.
Mm. So, remove that Algiers again.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that's when Bagel gets pregnant.
No, sir. And I always, maybe I blame myself, but I blame Abdul Shakur more. And maybe that's not right, but I do. Because I was out there working every day, going to school, and you could not keep up with the kids. I always blame him for that. Because there was no reason. He wasn't working. He was just flitting from house to house. You could have taken care of your kids, and I do blame him more than I blame myself. Same way with Fatima. You don't have a job. Why aren't you there with your kids? Why aren't you there making sure they go to school? Same thing he did with your dad. Okay. So, yeah. So I have a lot of resentment from Abdul Shakur. I mean, because I was trying to keep the house, not have us moving from place to place all the time, trying to pay bills, trying to keep, a roof over our head.
So what ended it completely? Was it when you moved to Arizona?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But that's when the separation. Mm-hmm. But like I said, it had ended. My relationship with Abdul Shakur ended before I had Howard. Because he just,
yeah.
It was, like I said, the disloyalty with what he was doing with Khadijah. That just, I remember, and I'll tell you what happened. One day he came. Now this is after the New York thing, after they had divorced him from Khadijah. He came to my house one day, and I went out, to see him off, and realized he had parked the car a block away so she wouldn't know that he was divorced from her. And that was like, okay, I'm done. I'm done with this guy. Because that to me was just the height of what? Anyway, but so that I'm serious. That literally was, I'm done. And so all that I was doing for the years was planning my getaway. I knew I had to go to school. I mean, I really feel Abdul Shakur could have been such a help. Even if he had just been a help, that may have changed things around. But he wasn't even doing that. Like with Fatima and Bagel, Shajat, nobody was he doing anything for. And when we moved into that place, it was like, I remember going out daily saying, we got to find, that's when we found that house.
All right, let me make sure I got everything off of my list. Oh, you know what? A situation I remember happening when we lived in Pebblewalk. Uncle Abadar and them were living in, what's the name of them? The Harbor or Harbor Apartments. Mm-hmm. That time, Ayub got in that situation with them kids. Yeah. That's one of my memories of you in the window with a gun, looking outside, almost looking like Malcolm X. Except you had an Uzi. You had an Uzi in your hand.
I know I had a.
I had 11 or something like that.
the AR, what is it? The rifle.
Okay.
Sold that Sister Karima.
Yeah.
Remember, because Yahya,
Mm-hmm.
they had attacked Ayub and him.
Mm-hmm.
I remember Ayub had done something on himself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They ran up into Sister Karima's house and tried to get Yahya.
Mm-hmm.
And she got her gun. And I had my gun.
I didn't know they ran into her house.
Mm-hmm. She would have been perfectly within the law to blow them away.
Right.
And
where were the men at the time?
Never anywhere around. Never to do anything. And, because Sister Karima had a similar situation. Well, hers not similar to mine. But the brother she was married to, what's his name? He was just I mean, and I was really fond of him.
It wasn't Shams.
Not Shams, or it was his brother.
Oh, I know who you're talking
about. Yeah, because he was always really sweet to me, really, really helpful. But the way he treated Karima, finally she divorced him. The way he treated Karima was just grotesque. But yeah, the men never were around when they should have been with the young man.
Yeah, I remember when that happened.
Mm-hmm.
I just remember that image of you looking out the window with the gun in your hand. Because it was a bunch. I don't know what happened, but it was just a bunch of them outside.
Ayub and Yahya had gone to a party, and it was sort of like this gang thing. They were outsiders, and they attacked them.
I think it had something to do with a girl.
Probably.
Yeah.
But the way a lot of the young men were treated, and this is why Jehoria talked to Jehoria, she said, you see a lot of the young men who were part of the Darl or even the Fulker, they because they didn't have strong male role models. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Another thing that was on my list was about your sister, Fatima, mental health issues.
Mm-hmm.
When did that come about, or when did you start noticing that?
It started when we were living in Algiers.
Okay.
But I always tell people, Fatima had been having issues since we were kids. Fatima, and I used to tell people that Fatima she would regale the group of friends we have with these stories that she'd make up, and they'd all be lies. She used to do that when she was a kid. And I always think back to that I could see signs of mental health issues even from then. Just making things up that weren't true. And what happened, I think it was after Omar's birth.
Mm-hmm.
When they were living in Algiers, she started hearing voices, and I remember telling Abu Dar, I said, "Remember Joe Ellen, the hospital? Joe Ellen, what was the name of Joe Ellen Hospital? They used to have this program on mental health and family. How do you deal with mental health issues?" I used to tell Abu Dar, you need to go to this. You need to bring the kids. You need to, really take this seriously. And yeah. And when we got back from DC
Mm-hmm.
is when it really started getting bad. And I remember they brought her to stay with us, and I remember they had to go running after her because she would just take off all her clothes and just run down the street screaming and stuff. And it was getting bad. And they finally, took her to have her diagnosed. But the Jamaat, you know, they didn't take. I mean, it was strange because they kept saying, the Sheikh dealt with chronic therapy, but I would tell Abu Dar, that's all well and good, and yeah, chronic therapy could help her, but she needs some medication.
So they were more into like praying it away.
No, not praying. There were things because the Sheikh he was a psychiatrist.
Okay.
So there were things that he was saying, and he did tell them to take her, because this is it does have a medical diagnosis to it. So anyway, they moved to the land, and that's when it got worse.
Yeah.
And I remember going on the land, telling Abu Dar, I remember that. She moved out of the trailer. She moved into this ramshackle piece of trailer painted the walls purple. And she was just saying, I told Abu Dar, this is not good. She's having problems. And I could tell when she would call me when I knew she was having issues. And she kept disappearing, and they would find her at truck stops where she had been sleeping with people, and it was just terrible. And then finally she disappeared from the land, and for months nobody could find her. And she finally contacted my mother, and my mother had somebody go and get her. She was in, I don't know if it was Texas or where she was. And so my mother brought her to Arizona, took her to the clinic and got her medication. And I think Fatima hasn't had, she would have some episodes initially, but ever since then, and that was years, she didn't. Now I will say, and I remember her telling me so many times how the medication was making her feel. She didn't want to keep taking it because it kept making her sleep. She said, I got these kids, I got to take care of them. I said, Fatima, you need to take this medication. But she finally got to the point where she said, I don't want to have these episodes. They scare me. I don't want my kids to see that. And so she made sure whenever she feels that she's hearing voices or something, she would go to the doctor. And so, initially they had her on these really antipsychotic drugs, and your system has to build up. But and so she for years she was fine, and she's been doing well. I don't know about the situation now that she's moved back.
Where is she now?
She's back in Georgia, on the land. Living with Bilal. I don't know if she still takes her medication.
How often do you talk to her?
I used to talk to her regularly, but she doesn't respond much, and that concerns me.
She just got married though, right?
Yeah, Sadika and all her anti-vaccine, these people with the anti-vaccine nonsense. So she came to. Didn't she come to? You went to Arizona? Did she come to Arizona when we had the thing? She came for that one.
She was living in Arizona at that time, I believe. Oh, she wasn't?
No,
because I remember she moved to Arizona. Did she marry that guy?
They were not married, but she had been working.
Yeah.
They had
Mm-hmm.
a house, and it really tore him apart when she left. I mean, because they had bought that house.
She up and left, or
Mhm.
she,
Well,
I mean,
she
an
told him
episode,
she was going to leave him.
but it wasn't an episode. Okay.
I already thought it was.
Well, how did her and Uncle Abadar end up divorcing and going to different?
After she left.
She just left.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
She left, moved to Arizona.
Okay.
No, she had been gone for months. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like I told people, don't tell me nothing about Abadar, because Abadar took care of them kids. He stayed there.
Mm-hmm.
He's always been there. Whatever Fatima, he tried to do whatever there was to do. I thought they were too indulgent with their kids, but
Okay. But Aunt Rhonda. Oh, so she never became Muslim.
They ready to become some religious Christian fundamentalist.
Is she right now?
Something crazy.
How did your family, outside of you and Aunt Fatima, take y'all becoming Muslim?
My mother didn't take it well. But like I used to tell her, as long as you're strong in your faith, don't worry about mine. If you feel you can't listen to me or hear anything I say about Islam, to me that tells me that you're not strong in your own faith. Mm-hmm. So, I've always maintained a relationship with my family. And I don't see no contradiction in that.
Yeah.
Because when we were all part of the Dar, they kept saying, "Oh, you can't contact your family and all of that." Yeah.
Well, you talking the wrong one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But yeah. My dad was crazy anyway. My dad. Initially he was saying the big issue for my dad is, like I said, was Fatima. He could care less what I did. He really didn't. I mean, I've had to tell my dad. I remember, certain things he was saying. I just don't look. I don't want to hear this stuff. So he stopped telling me stuff about Aunt Rhonda, because he used to say all kinds of crazy stuff about her. And I said, this woman is taking care of you. Nobody else than your kids are. And he would always say about Fatima, because she was always, everybody knew she was his favorite child. But, so it's just, and my mother, like I told people, I said, Mom, when I became Muslim, I remember my mom standing up at a meeting saying that she was a missionary Baptist. And I looked at her and said, when you missionary Baptist? When did this happen? But she comes from that. Now, that is a part of our family background. Both her parents, her dad was a deacon in the Missionary Baptist Church in Pontiac. My mother didn't go to church.
She tried to claim it.
I know. When the last time you've been to church? I know.
What about the passing of the two, your dad and your mom?
They had a love-hate relationship. My mother used to sleep with my father every now and then. Mm-hmm. And it was like, what the heck? But they you know, I think it was harder for my mom when my mom died because it was just closer to her. My dad was, and I wasn't real close to my mother. I tell people that, because my mother was very critical. Um, she was very bourgeois,
Mm-hmm.
and it was all about your what you have, what your status is, and all that. I really wish she had been alive when I got the Obama nomination.
She would have loved that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I was never looking for validation from either of my parents.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That's why when I hear a lot of people talk about their parents and their family, I think my family had. I mean, I don't know if it's I just came from a different mindset, but I never was trying to find validation or um you know, I've had to tell Akua that, when you have to respect the work that I have done. And that does bother me that I think sometimes that people don't respect the work that I done. Because they say librarian or archivist as if we're there to serve someone else, not to be academics ourselves. And so yeah. So
What would you say you got from your dad? Like, you see it in yourself, or you may see it in some of your kids.
Absolutely no. I'm serious. I'm trying to think. What did I get from my dad? Obesity as I get older.
Okay, what about your mom? What did you get from her, and what do you see in yourself and maybe some of your kids?
I think the big thing, and it's not a good thing that I think. So my mother was the kind of person that always felt you should be able to take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That what somebody does should not. You do what you need to do for yourself. You shouldn't have to ask people for support. She always said that if I have to ask you to pull me out of the ditch, then you are not the kind of person that I want to be.
I hear people say that too.
Yeah. And that's the way she was. And that's the way I think people should, after a certain amount of time, and this is my mother, should be self-sufficient. That's all I've ever wanted for my kids.
Mm-hmm.
It's all I've ever wanted, for myself. I don't want to, and I think my mother was like, don't want to ever be a burden to anybody. But I also want, and I think that's where my mother was. She was like, I never want to be a burden. That's why she refused to stop driving when she was driving over curbs and stuff. And I never wanted, and I think that's independence. My mother raised 4 very independent women, and I think that's the way she was. She was the oldest in her family, and much older than even her youngest sister. She's almost like parents to them. So I think in many ways that's the way I've been with my sisters. I've been almost like everybody thinks I'm the oldest oftentimes. At least I'm around to keep telling people that.
Okay, so all right, hold on. Now we're going to take questions from people that want to remain anonymous. Yes. Okay. So let's start with this person. That's it. Let's see. Where is it? All right. Go further down. Should be okay. Here we go. Oh, man, I must have put it in a group text 'cause I don't see it there. Let's see.
Mm. Mm.
Let me see something. Okay, it's further up. I forgot we were going back and forth about something else.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Let's see.
Mm.
Okay, that was that. All right, so here's the questions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Which one of your husbands did you actually love?
Mm. That's a good question. Mm. You know, I think all three of them at the early, maybe in the early parts or in the middle parts. I mean, with Clayton and with the Valley wasn't much of a middle part. I was only with Abdul Valley maybe about a year. But towards the end, it just I have this, and it's something in my mind, Sully. If I can't trust you, if I think you've been disloyal, that's the worst thing you can do. And all three of them were. So, yeah.
All right, you mentioned your family helping you financially.
Mm-hmm.
Were they upset that you continue to have children?
I don't know.
Did any of them mention anything to you
About children?
But they were helping you financially.
The only time my family helped me financially was when I come to the family reunions. I did not ask my family for money. So if they gave me money, it was because it was something they saw or they wanted to.
This person lucky I won't expose them.
But I'm trying to think, did I ever ask them for money? I don't. The only time, like I said, was for family reunion. And Aunt Rhonda was the main person to do that. And she never said to me, oh, you have too many children. Now, I would say maybe my mother would have said that. I'm sure she did. Because what she told me, I always remember this. She said, I love my kids too much. That, to me, said a lot. How can you love your kids too much?
Okay, the third question by the same person. Why continue having kids while living in poverty?
Because you're always thinking that things will get better. You're always optimistic. I love kids. I never thought, and this is what I was telling you, I never thought poverty would be my fate in life, I always had the idea that I was going to do better. And so I love kids. And I didn't see children as being a burden or that I could not provide something that they needed. So, I like I always say, I have my two of my good friends. Paula had one child. One of the woman that I used to ride to work with, she had one child. And I used to see them struggle with just that one child. And so I never felt that having a lot of children would make my life better. I mean, would make my life worse, or having one child could make my life better. I didn't see children as something. I don't know how to say this. That I don't connect poverty to children. Some people do, and that's the way they feel. I never made those kinds of connections because I saw too many times when it was the opposite.
All right. This one is, I think you kind of touched on this.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned you and your other sisters suffered child abuse by your sister's grandmother. Have you ever talked about it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm. I remember snapping at Mama Essie when she tried to say something or do something to Vicky. And it was like, no. I remember Nakua was there. But we never had a real discussion. I don't think she ever. Me and Randy have talked about it. I don't know about Fatima, but.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
This kind of was answered too, but I'll ask anyway. This is a follow-up question to question one. You mentioned that you wasn't in love with Abu or Sadiq's father when you married them. Do you feel like you're asexual?
Mm-hmm. Sometimes. But no, not asexual. Not asexual. No,
It's called something else.
it's not something else.
Well, you're
Emotionally unattached. Emotionally, now what is it?
well, you're attached to it. I mean, you're.
That's not to say I never loved them.
Hmm.
I wasn't in love when I got married. No, that didn't mean that I didn't grow to love them. I don't think with Abdul Malik, I never did, but I wasn't with him long enough to do that.
Okay.
Well, even with Clayton, they were bad. They were not the best kind of men. So that's all.
Maybe they evened you out. Okay, so the next question is: do you think you married because it was the thing to do for religious purpose or religious reasons? Okay.
It was expected. You were pressured. I did not want to get married after I had Vicky and Ayu, and I should not have. I could have stayed single. But, you look back on these things, hindsight is always 2020.
All right.
But I wouldn't have my kids.
What would you change in your romantic life?
I think looking at it, I don't know how to say that. How do you change? I think I would be more understanding. I don't think I'm the most understanding because I'm a black and white person when it comes to relationships, and that's not a good thing.
Mm-mm.
You know,
because there's a lot of gray areas.
Yeah, I'm not like that. You do something to me, and that's who you are, and that's not good. But it's almost as if my physical body just is repulsed.
That's understandable.
But I do need to be a little bit better about that.
You stated why you got in the workforce. Is it something you wanted to do? Did you always want to work?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I like work. I didn't know how much I would like working as an archivist, doing the kind of work that I do. I really love it. I always tell people I have a passion for it. But I also was raised by a woman who always worked. And I always saw work being a positive.
So when you see women that decide to just be house, take care of homekeepers, basically take care in the home, do you look at them differently? No.
I mean, I've been very much about doing what is best for your life.
Okay, next question is, with so many accomplishments in your professional life, do you feel like there's something you haven't completed?
I still do want to go ahead and look into a PhD program. That's the only thing. I mean, and it's not for
I'll find it. Something. Okay.
It's not for it's just for my own self, not to advance. I've done everything I wanted to do.
You just want to have a doctor in your name?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This is another person. Was it hard on her? Oh, it says her. Was it hard on you dealing with different children that wasn't her own, your own? Like,
No.
Lawrence, Erica, Damien.
No. I love them. Having other kids, I love them, and I think in many ways, my kids' friends all saw how caring I was, and I think it helped them. Because, so many of your old friends were broken.
She doesn't mean it that way, y'all. All right. You are one of the best librarians in the nation. Do you think you owe an obligation to other Black librarians?
I give back all the time. When I was in Dakar, I wrote a letter of recommendation for one of the librarians there. I got information on international programs for another librarian there. Any researchers. I even started helping a PhD student. I love to do the work that I really feel, like I said, I have a passion for and I'm good at. But yeah, I love that. I love this kind of work because I like when people start to discover new things, and I love education. I like academics.
Okay, this one I feel attacked on, but anyway, I know you're not going to say you have any favorite children, but do you have children that were easier for you to raise, and do you have children that was harder for you to raise? You don't have to answer that.
My girls, I will say this. My girls have always, without me saying who, have always done, I'm so proud of them. I really am. My sons are getting there, but I'm proud of them too. I really want everybody to, I worry about all of you. That's the thing about being a parent that I don't think people who have never been parents understand. That when my kids do something good, I am so happy. I am their biggest cheerleader. When they're struggling, I just want to see how I can help.
Okay. Now this one, they want me to. Okay. Do you regret? Do you have any regrets with Vicky?
Vicky?
Yes.
I can't I can't say I have any regrets with Vicky. Um, I think the problem that I have, like I said, I think, and I said this before when we were talking about my mom and how I was raised, um, that my mom always raised us to take responsibility, that you cannot rely on other people um, to make your life whole. And I just wish that I could have imparted that a little better. But I cannot have regrets about what I tried to do, which is what I was telling you about, even with the Jamaat. People were doing things they thought were right. Yes, they got things wrong, but the intention was never to do the wrong thing and make people be in pain. And I think too often we're always looking for people to apologize or to say something that will make their lives whole. But if you can't make your own life whole, I can't do it for you. So I don't know. Maybe I should be regret, but that's not who I am. And that's a bad thing. I know people don't like that about
Well,
me.
the question wants me to go through each child, so that's why I started with Vicky, and then I was going to say how you any regrets with him.
Mm-hmm. No. Well, no.
Or is this the answer for every kid?
That's the answer for all of them. All of you all, to me, are over the age of 30.
But I mean,
time to have responsibility.
Do you wish you would have
done something different?
Yeah. What are you,
Salima,
me,
no.
Fafa. Oh, hold on, who we stopping with?
I think there's a lot of things I would have done differently, but I don't know. I'm trying to think what would I have done differently. I mean, the one thing that I've always tried to be was there for all of my kids.
Shajad.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some things, but like I used to tell Shajad, you want me to apologize for me leaving you with your father. Same thing with Vicky. What you left the house, moved in with your grandparents, and you still made a mess of that. Whose fault is that? Was it their fault? Mm-hmm. Or was it yours?
I think this person is trying to do a lot of versus type questions. Mm-hmm. What was one of the most hurtful things that one of your children done to you?
Done to me?
Mm-hmm. Said or done to you either. Yeah.
Well, we can go into a lot of things that what Vicky did, but the most hurtful thing is something. And I can't remember which of my kids did it. Because I don't. Those things don't stick with me. Mm-hmm. Kids are kids. They're gonna do all kinds of hurtful things, Okay. But we can, I can brush that off because my kids are my kids. I don't care what you do to me. You're still my child.
Right.
Emotions go up and down with all your kids. Yeah. The same thing with parents.
That's how relationships are. What was the greatest thing that you ever witnessed from one of your children?
And this is just okay. This one is purely materialistic.
Okay.
One of the greatest things my kids did for me is that time you heard me. I've been begging for an iPad. Remember that? Mm-hmm. and you all got me that iPad, and it was like the world is. I got the best kids in the world. I remember that. It was something else you all did too. I mean, we can talk about the material thing. Emotionally,
What? Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm trying to think emotionally. I don't know. I like, Nafisa always is doing things for me.
Yeah.
That's who Nafisa is. She loves her family. I think Nafisa in many ways. Bagel, everybody thinks Bagel is more like me, but I think Nafisa is more like me because Nafisa loves her family. Y'all don't understand that.
No, we see that, but
yeah,
we see that, but we also see it in Bagel, and I think a lot of it is that Nafisa and Howard were raised somewhat by themselves.
Yeah, that's what.
As where Bagel
Yeah.
was around us more.
Yeah.
So I think that's the difference.
Yeah, everybody says that about Nafisa and Howard.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But Nafisa is more. The only reason why I say it, like Nafisa in so many ways is like Nika. She has a passion for whatever she's doing, and Nafisa will do the best job.
I see that.
And she doesn't care, even if it's something small. She will do the best job. And that's the way I like to think that I am. Even if it's something small, I am going to try to do the best job I can. But yeah, Bagel's a lot. Bagel's kinder than I am. Bagel is just a kind-hearted person.
Yeah, I think everybody have these pieces. Okay.
Yeah, we want to talk about the worst child I had was when Sully was growing up. I know you weren't the worst. I had some rough kids. But Sully, you were hard. Do you recognize that in yourself?
Thank you.
Do you just think what do you think it was?
Looking back at it, I think I probably was just screaming for attention, screaming out for attention from you guys. I think I was a middle child. Me and Fafa was middle children.
But did you ever think about?
I didn't know I was a difficult child. I didn't. Not at the time. I was a child doing child things. I didn't know I was difficult. I wasn't bringing drugs home. I wasn't causing problems in the street or anything like that.
Just causing problems at home.
Yeah, I didn't know. I didn't notice that I was.
You've never noticed that either. He was.
Yeah. I think we just wasn't aware. I don't.
Do
I don't
you
recall
remember though? And that's always I wondered about you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember the time that guy accused you of doing something to
breaking? Yeah, I remember. Mm-hmm.
Do you remember how many times I went to court?
Yeah, I remember.
That's what I always say. I said, I don't know if my kids ever realize how hard I tried to keep them from.
But that was probably the only situation I've ever was in.
Yeah.
And that was something that I had nothing to do with.
Yeah, exactly.
So it wasn't like this is the one time I actually did something to get in trouble.
Well, no, and that was my point. I said, Sully doesn't do things to get in trouble. You were just trouble at home.
Right. Just it
was important for me, for you not to be put into the system.
Right. And I remember us going down and the guy wouldn't show up.
Yeah. And they kept postponing
over and over. And finally it was like, listen, the guy didn't show up, so on and so forth. And they really never took that off.
Really?
Yeah, I had to go down and get that expunged.
What do you mean?
And pay the money for that.
That was outrageous.
Yeah, it was still showing up.
Anyway.
It just showed that they just never concluded it.
Really?
They just never concluded it.
That should have been dismissed. Shouldn't it have been dismissed?
They never dismissed it. It just never had a conclusion. All the way before, because this is when I was moving to Texas. It showed up. This was in 2011,
What?
maybe 12.
What did it say?
Just said it wasn't concluded.
Oh my God.
It never said there was anything.
That's crazy. No, I mean, the thing is that the boys were always the most difficult. Even Shajad, even though he was doing well there for a while, but it was always a struggle getting people to get up, go to school. Ayub always talking about we let him drop out of school. Ayub never. These are the things that I have my issues with Abdul Shakur about too, because again, I'm out here having to go to work to keep a roof over our head, and you can't even make sure people go to school. And there was no reason why he couldn't do this. He was not working full time. And I don't know if anybody has ever asked him why he just could not. Why couldn't you help with Fatima? Somebody needed. I had gone up to the school so many times about Fatima and Bagel, and it was like, I've got to work, and you can't do this. And there was a lot of issues.
Okay. This question has kind of been answered, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. You have been married 3 times. Which one of your husbands do you think was the best man and why? If they watch this,
Abdul Malik was a good person. Abdul Malik was a good person. He really was a good father. Loved Sadiq. When Sadiq was little, made sure he was his shadow. And he even with, like I said, he took Ayub. He was always kind to Vicky when they were babies. He was a good person.
What characteristics make up a good woman to you? What characteristics make up a good man to
you? Well, like I said, I like people who treat people kindly. I like people who have a sense of humor, both in men and women. And I like people who are loyal, who recognize kindness. Because it's one thing to be kind, but it's also you have to recognize kindness in others, and you got to have some empathy. You've got to be able to say, "Oh, I didn't realize that," or that what happened to you should not have happened. But it's hard. It's hard. So I don't know. I like people too who are educated and men. I like somebody who has a sense of humor. And I like somebody who has a real strong spiritual side to them. That's important to me. That's why I really liked being in Dakar, because even though people are out doing work and everything, that Adhan call, them people are making wudu on the streets, throwing their rugs out, making salat. And anywhere you go, wherever you are, you stop and you do your prayers. So I want somebody who still sees Islam as being important in their lives. And it is not just for show. It's something that because I see Islam in very different ways than my kids do. I know the value and how it has improved my life. And I always make dua for you all that you get that same understanding. But,
you have always been a well-tempered person.
Who?
Well-tempered person.
Oh, well.
Who was the hardest person for you to get along with?
To get along with. Um, Probably. You mean out of my kids?
No, just period, I
Oh.
guess.
Oh, the hardest people to get along with are people I just don't.
No, person. We're talking,
Person,
they want one person.
one person, hard to get along with. Let me think. Let me think.
I do
Uh,
want to bring up something that you mentioned
tell me,
earlier.
tell me, tell me somebody who you
Well,
think.
because you talked about Sister Khadija, but
Um,
then later, didn't y'all make
oh
some kind
yeah,
of
yeah,
reconciliation
yeah.
and reconcile
You
it?
know, I've had to tell Khadijah. I mean, I deal with people on my own terms, and Khadijah's one of those people because I do think that she recognizes the problems that she had uh, and has tried to rectify them. I was just texting with her this morning, and I really told her I appreciate the fact she's the one who introduced me to Fatu. Um, so it's not, I'm not that kind of person. I can't hold grudges
So,
unless you've really done something. Now, if you should go out, you want to know his sister, what's her name? Who he's staying with?
sister,
Your aunt.
I, um, which one is she staying with?
What's her name? Whatever her name is. She's a problem. She's a real pill. And I tried to avoid her at every cost.
Oh, okay.
What's her name?
I'm trying to
Um,
remember.
Not Tanae. Um, what's her name? Well, whatever her name is. Yeah, she's a real problem.
I forgot her name. Sorry.
Yeah, I forgot her name.
Okay, so yeah, your relationship with Sister Khadija. What would you say it is now?
It's cordial. It's fine. It's really I see Sister Khadijah as in some ways as a tragic figure, and I mean that sounds more Shakespearean, but in so many ways it is because Dushikor was just not the good right person to for her at the time. Um, but the relationship she's in now has not been easy either. And so sometimes, you get back what you put in. And I do think that Khadijah is trying. Um, I'm not one to hold grudges. Um, and she can't impact my life, although she has in good ways. So, you know, I am cautious with Khadijah, and I always will be. Um, but I try to meet people where they are. I don't hold grudges. I do. I don't really. And even with Abdul Shakur, even with Abdul Malik and all these other people, even Clayton, I didn't hold any grudges against them. Um, I just knew they weren't the people that I wanted to be around. And that was hard for me, Sully, to get to that point where I could say, I'm dealing with people on my own terms. That includes kids, that includes family members. I contact you or I don't. We keep in touch or we don't. I'm not allowing these relationships to define me anymore. When I used to do that.
Yeah. Uh, we we didn't talk about Aisha. What was your relationship with Aisha and
Which Aisha?
um, Sister Khadijah's daughter? Did y'all?
Oh, I mean, in many ways, I did a lot for Aisha when you know Khadijah had some real issues. Her, I don't even want to tell you about the time I went over her house to clean it up. It was, I, let's just say I gagged. And I used to do whenever I whenever I would do my kids' hair or do something special for my kids, I always tried to do the same for Bilquis' kids and for Aisha. I always tried to treat them like they were my kids.
Hmm.
Um, and that's why in so many ways I've always felt that it was that my kids put out more effort than to maintain relationships. And you all have always been really good about that. Even when I think it would have been fine for you all to say I'm done. You all have always been good about those kinds of things.
Um, you didn't talk about you and Sister Belkis's relationship much at
Yeah,
all.
our relationship was has changed over the years. We used to talk a lot, but we don't talk at all now at all. Um,
Why is that?
I don't know that. I think part of it is that Bilquis had a lot of issues with Khadijah, and she did totally break off. She told Khadijah not to even contact her. And when Khadijah asked me about it, I said, it doesn't surprise me. You know, you have to acknowledge what you did in the relationship. I wrote all of that to her, and I told her that. So I think in some ways it was either you deal with her or you deal with me, and I think it could be so. And I'm just not the kind of person that I don't. I mean, I think there has to be when people have moved on. Khadijah's no longer in the relationship. She has struggled with her own relationship and her health. I'm just not. These relationships don't bother me any longer. Um, I don't give up anything to treat you kindly. I'm not. I'm not. I don't think I'm giving up anything to do that, and so I don't mind. So I don't. Like I said, I don't know. I think that has something to do with you'd have to ask Sister Bill Keys about that. But she still, um, we still send salams and greetings and stuff like that. But I'm so busy, Sully. You know how busy I am. I don't really have time to think about these things.
Hmm. Yeah.
I'm too busy. I'm too busy doing the stuff that I really enjoy. Um, to worry about some of this other stuff. I would love for things to be different, to be better. I love Assia and I used to be real close. Me and Sophia used to be real close. I would always go see Sophia when I was in Chicago. We'd go out to lunch or we'd go out to dinner. I'd come over to the house, you know. Um, the same with Hadra, you know, with Ahmed, all of them. Um, Adam, they were always real close to me. They knew they can contact me and call me. So yeah, yeah.
Okay. Um. All right. That's the end of that person. Asking too many questions. All right. Next person. Hold on. Does that work? Give me 1 second.
Rain's coming, it says. Nafis is probably fussing. What time is it?
Yeah.
I didn't know I was going to be here all this time, Sully. Mhm.
We're almost done in that way, but I'll be with her. But someone's coming up and
What'd you say?
at 8 o'clock. I'm not sure. I'll have to find out. Yep. Okay. I'll call you back in about 10, 15 minutes. I should. Can't be in multiple places. Okay. Um. This is gonna be the last ones. All right. Let's read through these.
Okay.
What is the accomplishment that you're most proud of in your life?
Children.
Okay. What do you want your legacy to be?
uh, uh, ouch. My legacy. That my kids gave back to the world and that they were good people. And that I was, that I did a good job as an archivist, as a professor. That I hope that's my legacy, that people can learn from what I've left uh, to the world. And those are my kids for the most part. But I am most proud of my children. That's the reality. I'm always telling people about my kids. Sometimes I think they didn't ask for this.
Okay. What is your wish for all your kids?
Oh, more than anything, I wish all of you had a feeling for Islam the way I do, and that you all could see how it is Islam that has made me the person I am today. That I people do respect the work that I do, and they can look past you know how I look, but they also do see that how I look as a Muslim woman has not restricted or stopped me from doing, you know, the things that are important in the world.
Okay, you're starting a new chapter in life. What is your hopes for this chapter?
Oh, that I love to travel. I
That
love
was the
to
next question. Where do you want to travel next? Okay.
Spain,
Okay.
and then Hajj. Yeah, I do. I love traveling. I love, and I think that is one way to really start to get a respect for other people of the world. Quran tells you to travel of the world so that you may learn empathy, so you may learn differences. And I think it's important.
What is the best piece of advice that she's ever gotten or you ever gotten, and who gave it to you?
Best piece of advice that I've ever gotten. It was something Nafisa told me. I always think about that, and it's really. She said it's something that somebody else told her. Um, you know, don't ask to, and I know I'm not saying it out. Don't ask to do something that is something I can't remember exactly what it was. Okay, but
We'll have to ask
I have to
Nafisa.
ask Nafis about that. But the other advice is my mom always said, if you see someone in a ditch, don't ask if they need a helping hand. Give it to them.
Yeah.
So
But that goes back to your mom saying,
yeah,
yeah.
Yeah, my mother's always said, if you have to ask somebody for help, then they're not, your friend, or they're not your family, because they should see. And that's what I always try to. You got to have some foresight, some empathy, in order to. And so my mom was always like that. Said, if you see somebody in a ditch, don't ask them, do they need help?
And I guess this will be the last question.
Okay.
Did you want 10 kids?
Did I want 10 kids? That's like saying, did I want Hawa? Did I want Nafisa?
Well, I mean,
No.
not okay, but
No, I used to tell people I wanted 6.
So I would have made the cut. I think Fafa would have made the cut.
Fafa, Baywan, Shajad, Nafis, and Hawa.
Yeah.
But yeah, my kids are such blessings. I always tell people my kids are the best, and they always ask me about my kids. So they can't remember names sometimes, but my kids are a blessing.
All right, this is the last question.
Right,
somebody put in the last second one. Does she feel like the love she has given has been returned?
Nope. You said I was quick with that one, huh?
Well, we hope that you receive all the love and blessings that you have given.
Well, I don't think your kids can. Parents, unless you're a parent, you don't know that. I think parents, or well, at least some parents, because there are some very abusive parents out there, but parents just have an unconditional love. It doesn't matter. And that's a hard thing, especially if you're dealing with serial killers and people who have done horrific things. But it's hard to turn that off. It's hard to turn off being a parent. I don't know if any of you all feel that way about your own kids, but it is. And I think for me, it's even harder because my mother was not like I am. Like I said, my mom would always tell me, she's told me this number of times that I love my kids too much. And it would be like, how is that possible? How do you love your kids too much?
What do you think it says, though, that none of your kids have a lot of kids?
Smart.
after seeing you,
but she was Sally. Here, you want to take that?
Yeah.
What's her name? Ethel Kennedy. She had 11 kids. None of her kids had 11 kids.
Any of them have a lot of kids?
No. That is common. I think
like
when
we love our siblings and stuff, but we're like, do we want to put somebody through that?
Well, it depends. So I mean, Elon Musk? I guess he feels I got enough money. I can have 11 kids.
Right.
But see, that's because people attach sustenance, attach money to having children rather than attaching any other aspects of having children. How many of those kids do you think Elon Musk deals with regularly?
How many kids he has?
11.
Oh, he has 11 kids?
I think it's 11.
Oh,
Either he has 11 or what's his name? Just had another baby.
He has 12, first of all.
12.
Yeah, he has 12. You're talking about what's his name? Nick Cannon.
Yeah.
I believe
so.
Yeah,
so Elon Musk then has 9.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is that ask those women. Half of those women say he doesn't do any of those kids. I mean, we just, you know what I'm saying? It's more than having money. Money is definitely a huge
But another
plus.
portion of it is.
But if you don't have any emotion connection to those kids.
Right. But I think what a lot of people will say is it possible to have those one-on-one interactions that children need? You know, that relationship.
I don't know, because I don't know what that one-on-one means, because
that special attention that some children may need more than others.
But I think that's going to happen whether you have 1 or 20. Okay. If you don't have that, if you can't make time for that one-on-one interaction, and how long is that one-on-one interaction? Excuse me, just once a day, once a week, once every 10 or I mean, so it's almost this idea is that you don't have the capacity if you have more children, but you do have the capacity if you have one. When that is not necessarily the case. I mean, I all I'm saying is that it definitely depends, because some kids do need more constant interaction while others don't. Yeah. But I think that's going to be the case if you're 1, or if you're 2, or if you're 3, or if you're 4. If you are not emotionally there, period, it's going to depend. I mean, all I'm saying is that I just know too many cases where that happens in families that maybe be 3 kids. If you're not going to have the time to spend, you're not going to have the time to spend, even if it's 1 child. I just don't think. I think we get. I don't know. I just think that sometimes we're looking for, and even in that sense, even if you have 2 kids, what's to say that all the time that you can spend with them is going to make a difference in who they are? There are too many cases of that not even being, I mean, that didn't happen. So I don't know. I don't know if it's a matter of the numbers. And I think that's what a lot, because even Amaya was saying that when we were all in, when we were in the Gambia, she was saying, she's not having any kids, and kids this and kids that. And I'm saying that that's fine, but don't project what you think a perfect relation, a perfect parent-child relation is on what everybody else does. You can't project. So how do you know if your mother had been 30 and you were 20 and you were born then, that it would be so much better for you? You don't know that. These are all suppositions that you can make about what you think is ideal, but we don't know what's ideal. We don't know what's the best way, because 30, 40 years ago, this was normal for families, and families did well, and they survived, and they were close, and they did for each other. While today you have families of 1 and 2 kids in there. I mean, what we've been talking about, George Santos.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? It's just, you can't you can't have this idealized notion of what a parent-child relationship should be, what that quantity should be in order to make a successful child, because it depends on who that parent is and who that child is.
Okay, and we'll let you have the closing.
Mhm.
Anything you want to say in closing to viewers, kids, people you know?
I think the big thing that I would say is I want you all to treat each other well. I sometimes think that my kids um, don't really, and I want you to look out for each other. And I know that's hard for some of you, um, but that's the one thing that I can say about me and my sisters. We always were there for each other. And you know, we've all done a whole lot of crazy stuff. But, you know, we're there for each other. And I want that for my kids. I want you to be kind to each other and to be there for each other. And you know, because some of us have ups and downs, and
Yes.
we need family that will be understanding and that will be there for us. So that's what I want. That's my last bit of advice for my kids.
Okay, and I know we didn't go into a lot
Mhm.
of things, like,
Mhm.
because I know you met some special people along the way, some
Oh yeah,
special relationships, like
yeah,
you mentioned Paula
yeah,
and other people that you met at
yeah.
Tulane
Mhm.
and other places as you
Who have
know,
been longtime
longtime
friends.
friends that did
Yeah,
a lot. I
yeah.
remember the lady in College Station. Remember the one? I think she used to bring me to
Oh
my yeah.
yeah,
She was
yeah. That was what was her name? Fatima, no, not Fatima. You know. Oh my God. From Syria.
yes,
Yeah.
but
She was just that was just a kindness. Like the sister Fatu in Dakar. She would just bring me food and she took Howard to the airport. You know, they took me to the airport. Then they turn around again and take me to the airport. She, you know, just anytime I needed something, she was there. You know, there are just kind people who are out there, and it's like, you know, I that's what I want. I want my kids to be like that, that you see somebody in need and you, if you can help them, you help them. Because there was no reason why Fatu needed to do that for me. But she did. She was really, really, I mean, just kindness. And like you said, what was this? I can't think of the sister name. And she would all, I mean, she used to come and take you, then she would always take you to Sam. Why did she take you to Sam's Club? She would always take you and get stuff. You know, take you to get blood transfusions. And it was never a thing of, oh, here, you know, my handout, you, when are you gonna pay me? There are kind people in the world, and I see that in like Bagel's like that. She's just kind, and it's hard not to
yeah.
do that.
Sometimes the world can make you like you want to be that, but the world will make you so closed in because
Yeah.
you feel like you're being
Yes,
used and
yeah.
stuff. But
And that's the thing.
yeah,
Even with your Abu, you know, there's ways to be kind without feel like you're being taken advantage of. And I think we all, and I'm trying to do that for you know, Abdul Shakur, which I do need to call him, but you know, just there's just not there's so many there's so much meanness in the world. To see somebody doing a kindness, sometimes you say, why are you being so kind to me? Why? And there's a sister, Corca, Corca, what was Corca's last name? But she was just, I told her I needed to go to the hairdresser. She called the hairdresser. She tries to make sure I get there. Make sure that they know I mean, she didn't have to do that. All she had to do, give me the number, even though, this woman did speak English, but Corca would call her and it's just like these little small acts of kindness, just make you want to, okay, how can I pass it on? So that's what I want my kids to understand. There is kindness, and that more than anything, I think being kind to each other is important. So that's all.
Okay, almost 4 hours, but okay.
Oh my God.
All right, y'all. We're signing out. Oh, no, I think I pushed the wrong button. And so that was your last.
That was a long interview.
That's what she wanted to end with, y'all. It was a long interview.
That was it.
Okay.
Thank you, Sully.
All right, now I'll end it after the thank you.